Chapter 1193. At this time, Crimson Moon, who was in front of Dean, saw that he had learned her devour domain. She immediately changed the structure of the domain, mixing toxins into the black mist so that Dean's black mist could not assimilate it. In this way, relying on her own quantity, she could in turn devour part of the black mist that Dean had demonized and feed it into her own tonic. Free cereal, all these changes were very clear in Dean's eyes. When he saw Crimson Moon's black mist change again, Dean immediately guessed her thoughts, but at this moment he had no time to continue to change the structure. After all, one was an autonomous structure and the other was a simulation. He would always be a beat slower. Moreover, Crimson Moon's black mist had already shrouded at this moment. Flame! Dean let out a low roar, and the black mist suddenly turned into a crimson blood mist. Then, like a huge fireball, it collided with Crimson Moon's black mist. Suddenly, Crimson Moon's black mist shrank rapidly like ice and snow, and was gradually defeated by Dean's flaming blood mist. The blazing temperature of the blood mist suppressed Crimson Moon's black mist. Although it was mixed with toxins, it was all burned to ashes in front of the high temperature. Crimson Moon's face changed. She quickly used her mind to construct a layer of ice within the black mist, which emitted a strong chill to contend with Dean's flaming blood mist. However, she soon discovered that the temperature of Dean's blood mist was extremely terrifying, and the ice she constructed could not stop it at all. Only if she exerted all her strength and raised the temperature of the ice to more than -200 degrees could she suppress Dean's flaming blood mist. He has a deeper mastery of the flame structure than I do. Crimson Moon quickly realized this and quickly shrank back into the black mist. She did not touch Dean. Although the latter did not continue to simulate her black mist structure, he added the flame structure, and the destructive power had surpassed her. This was her specialty, but she was defeated by Dean in this aspect. Thinking that Dean was a lamb waiting to be slaughtered under her scalpel, and now he could defeat her in the field she was good at, she felt a burst of shame and anger. Her heart was filled with hatred and anger for Dean, and there was a strong killing intent. Want to run? Dean saw Crimson Moon retreat and immediately sneered. Don't you want to kill me? Why are you running away? How dare you provoke me? Crimson Moon was enraged. Her eyes flashed with a blood-red light as she abruptly stopped in her tracks. She naturally wouldn't fall for Dean's provocation, but she knew that it was meaningless for her to continue to retreat. From Lin Changsheng and the Devil King's casual attacks, it could be seen that they wanted to borrow Dean's hand to deal with her. Crimson Moon sneered and raised her hand, and a black mist transformed into a spear flew out, like a pear-blossom spear, and surrounded the Light King. The Light King's face was ugly, and suddenly his whole body shone brightly, and countless light arrows shot out, colliding with Crimson Moon's black mist spear, and canceled each other out. Crimson Moon raised her hand again, and countless black spears came out. The Light King continued to use light to block, colliding with the spears every second. It was incomparably gorgeous, and in just a few minutes, he had collided hundreds of times. Chapter 1194. Don't force me. Light King gasped, his face suddenly hideous. Don't think that I don't have the ability to drag you down with me. I'm willing to withdraw. If you continue to chase me, I'll kill whoever chases me first. Crimson Moon frowned slightly and slowed down her movements. She was a little hesitant. During her time in the Empire, she had learned some of the Light King's secrets and knew that he was no ordinary king. The demonic insect in his mind was extremely powerful and had long since devoured the human will in his body. That demonic insect was completely in control of his mind, unlike other kings who were only affected by its interference and subconscious catalysis. Who knows when you'll come back just because you say so? Dean saw Crimson Moon's hesitation. He raised his eyebrows and imitated Light King's indifferent expression. If everyone is like you, I'm also willing to withdraw and watch the tigers fight. Wouldn't it be better to intervene at the end? You, Light King, glared at him. He didn't expect that it was not Crimson Moon, but this king of the Federation who had little hatred for him. What do you think? Dean looked at Icebird and Demon Emperor who were chasing behind. Icebird was Lin Chongqing's incarnation. He didn't take advantage of the chaos to leave. Otherwise, Demon Emperor would definitely chase after him. At that time, Dean and Crimson Moon, who were chasing Light King, would also be pulled back. They would join forces with Demon Emperor to kill Lin Chongqing. Therefore, he followed them indifferently, as if he didn't care that he was the target of everyone. Demon Emperor looked indifferent and didn't respond. Icebird didn't have any expression as if she was not involved. Dean sneered. Since you don't want to be the first bird, then let him go. Anyway, I won't be the one fighting to the end. Then he stopped attacking. Crimson Moon's expression changed slightly. If she let Light King run away now, it would give him time to recuperate. If she was weak when he came back, it would ultimately help him. Her eyes flashed as she looked at Demon Emperor. Your Majesty, if you don't say anything, then let him go. Demon Emperor said indifferently, since he is trouble, then solve it. Why look for trouble for yourself? The King of Light's complexion changed, and he said angrily, Your Majesty, I've followed you for so many years, fighting in the north and south. Even if I don't have any meritorious service, I've worked hard. I'm willing to help you. So why do you want to abandon me? The Demon Emperor said indifferently. Do you not have an answer to this question? You already knew? The Radiant King's expression suddenly changed, and he looked at him with incomparable malevolence. But I had already guessed that you knew, and you even knew her hidden secret. She's the same as you, but you pretended that you didn't know. You ambushed Candle Dragon Lord to give her a chance to escape. You must have joined forces with this Lin Chongqing a long time ago. Once this muddle-headed worm and I died, you would surround and kill Crimson Moon. The confused worm he was referring to was Dean. Dean didn't say anything, but Crimson Moon's expression changed slightly. If she hadn't been willing to believe it before, she was now feeling a little uneasy. If it was just the Demon Emperor and Lin Chongqing, she felt that she could barely handle them. But the key was that the Radiant King was dead, and there was Dean, whose strength was still unknown. This made it impossible for her to control the situation. What's the point of struggling on your deathbed, great sage? The Demon Emperor's eyes turned slightly cold. Do you think I don't know the purpose of you compromising by my side? You are all slaves that my father captured and used to guard my clan's mausoleum and territory. You lowly kneel in extravagant hopes that one day you will be able to stand up, but you don't know that I have already seen through your thoughts. You have been kneeling for too long, and your vision is too limited. Don't you want to return to your own planet? Don't you want to find a formula for the perfect life? Humph, it's a pity that the formula already exists. Your extreme ice demon insect clan had already completed the experiment on Lin Chongqing more than 200 years ago, but unfortunately he escaped. Do you know why every time the Crimson Moon descends, I gather all the kings to discuss war matters? Sea beasts? Snow apes? I don't care about those things at all. I just want you to know your place under my eyes, and not give you a chance to snitch on me. Speaking up to here, the Demon Emperor slightly sneered and said, The apostles that you secretly sent to the Federation were also killed. Do you know why? That's right, more than 200 years ago, my father signed a confidentiality agreement with Lin Chongqing. This agreement continues until I am here, and it will continue in the future. The extreme ice demon insects that return to Earth will never know the true situation on Earth. As soon as the words came out, the Light King's eyes widened in disbelief, and then his eyes were filled with indignation. Crimson Moon's eyes flashed, and she turned her head to look coldly at the Demon Emperor. It seemed that she was ready to make a move at any time. Dean was a little surprised. He didn't expect there to be such secrets. He suddenly felt that it was a little ridiculous when he thought of the tragic battle at the border. The generals and soldiers at the bottom were fighting passionately, playing out scenes of tear-jerking war stories, but they didn't know that the highest rulers at the top had already secretly colluded with each other. Then, what was the meaning of these sacrificed warriors? He felt that the value measurement in this was too cruel too ruthless. Like a pyramid system, when there was a pyramid system, there would be a situation where the higher levels looked down on the lower levels. When life was no longer equal, there would be a tragedy, a tragedy. When one was born into such a group and existed in such a form of life, perhaps they were already destined to face such things, to bear such things, to obey, or to rule. The Demon Emperor seemed to know the killing intent in Crimson Moon's eyes, and his expression still didn't change. He indifferently said, "However, the confidentiality agreement only helps Lin Changsheng keep his existence a secret, and Lin Changsheng will also pay the corresponding price. Outside of this agreement, it doesn't prevent us from fighting each other." Just like the two Dragon Masters of the Fire Dragon country, they were also one of the people who signed the confidentiality agreement. But now, the Candle Dragon Master is dead. Crimson Moon still looked at him coldly, and her killing intent didn't decrease in the slightest. The Light King said angrily, "Since you guys conspired to sign the confidentiality agreement, who knows whether you guys conspire to sign another agreement? For example, get rid of us first? Let's kill each other, then you guys clean us up, and finally fight each other?" The Demon Emperor said indifferently, "If you guys are worried, you can get rid of Lin Changsheng first." "What do you mean by killing each other? What a joke. Are you guys on the same side? If it weren't for the fact that you all have ulterior motives, how could you have been provoked by Lin Changsheng's words?" The Light King choked slightly, and his face turned purple. "Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You already knew about Crimson Moon's power, and you used her to deal with me. No matter which one of us dies, you'll take the dead person's body and reach the perfect life state you've been pursuing." The Demon Emperor sneered. "Unfortunately, plans can't keep up with changes. I'm guessing that you, Lin Changsheng, have the same plan? You already knew that this little brother has a special physique and isn't an ordinary king. You want us to get rid of him first and then take his body. That way, none of us will be a match for you." The Demon Emperor suddenly changed the topic to Lin Changsheng. Icebird was slightly startled, but she didn't deny her identity at the moment. She snorted and said, "This person isn't from our federation, but from your empire. Otherwise, how would the new Crimson Moon King know him?" Seeing that the Demon Emperor wanted to hide their relationship, Dean was moved, but he didn't immediately jump out to expose it. Although it would be a slap to Lin Changsheng's face, it wouldn't be good for him either. Perhaps Lin Changsheng had also expected this, so he had the confidence to say so. The Demon Emperor glanced at Dean. Seeing that Dean was indifferent, he frowned slightly, seeming to be a little disappointed, but this emotion didn't stay on his face for a second. He changed the topic and said, "In any case, my suggestion now is to get rid of this great sage demonic insect first. As for the next matter, we'll talk about it later." Crimson Moon glanced at Dean, who was next to her. After a moment of silence, she nodded. Dean also expressed that he had no objection. Icebird said indifferently, "That's good. For Lin Changsheng, the King of Light must be killed, or he would be exposed." If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to get Dean's body to deal with the current situation, the King of Light would have been the first target of his provocation. Seeing that they had decided on a plan in a few words, the King of Light was so angry that his whole body was shaking, and his face was flushed. What was his identity? He was the king of the empire, and he was also the great sage demonic insect. No matter which identity he had, he was incomparably noble. But now he was sentenced to death by a few words, and he didn't even have a chance to interject. This feeling made him so aggrieved that he wanted to self-destruct, but he knew that even if he did his best, he couldn't kill the Demon Emperor, Crimson Moon, and the others. "Kill!" Dean shouted softly. Crimson Moon, who was next to him, didn't take the initiative to attack. Dean's previous crazy counterattack had left a lingering fear in her heart, and she was worried that the King of Light would do the same to her. Chapter 1195. Whoever wants to kill me will die with me. The Light King's face was distorted. If everyone present was a king, he could still escape, but the Demon Emperor, Crimson Moon, and even Lin Changsheng, who was eyeing him covetously, were not simple characters. Even if he revealed his true form, he would not be able to escape death. He could only fight with all his might and drag one of them down with him to sacrifice for his race. Seeing that the Demon Emperor was the first to rush over, he immediately locked his eyes on the Demon Emperor. His whole body suddenly blazed with light, like a high-energy incandescent lamp, illuminating the world in pure white. It was dazzling and dazzling. Even with Dean's powerful vision, he felt that his line of sight was pure white. Countless light particles completely covered his line of sight, and he could not penetrate it. He felt as if his body was molting, and a burning sensation appeared on his body. Counterattack before death. Dean thought of the terrifying movement of the Candle Dragon Lord's counterattack before death. His eyes moved, but he did not retreat to dodge. Instead, he tried his best to turn his eyes and search the surroundings. 7 or 8 eyeballs suddenly drilled out of his shoulders, neck, cheeks, and other parts of his body. They kept rotating, and from the intense white light, a vague figure was gradually filtered out. Based on the smell, it was Crimson Moon. Whoosh! He suddenly pounced forward. At the moment before the attack, he did not reveal any killing intent. His expression was extremely calm, and the strange eyeballs on his body were also very quiet. However, when he was within 10 feet of her, the crazy killing intent could no longer be contained and leaked out. His muscles suddenly squirmed, and terrifying sharp blades shot out from inside. They shot out from all parts of his body, including the parts of his neck where the eyeballs grew. The eyeballs closed, and the structure changed instantly, shooting out sharp blades. Poochie! The sound of flesh being cut and pierced rang out, and hot blood splashed all over his face. Dean's eyes narrowed. He saw that Crimson Moon's figure had been pierced, but she strangely turned into a distorted smoke and quickly floated to another place. She once again turned into a humanoid appearance, but a large amount of black fog burst out from her body, covering her whole body completely, and she disappeared in the black fog. Go to hell! Suddenly, a crazed roar came from another direction. Dean's hair suddenly stood up, and he felt a sharp blade cutting his neck. Death was approaching, and his brain even stiffened for a moment, stopping thinking. But this moment was extremely short. When he reacted, he immediately turned his body illusory, distancing himself from the direction of danger. Only then did he have time to look. He saw the intense white light shrink instantly, turning into an extremely compressed light beam, and suddenly pierce through the slender figure of the Demon Emperor, from his back, through the entire sky, and seemed to trace to the other end of the horizon. This scene was more terrifying than all the laser cannons he had ever seen. Dean was startled for a moment. The white light in his line of sight gradually disappeared. He saw that the King of Light had changed from a handsome young man to a white-haired old man in the blink of an eye. It seemed that the blow had completely squeezed out his life energy. While he was still in shock, his other eyeball noticed a cloud of black fog rushing toward him from the other side of his line of sight. Dean quickly recovered. He didn't pay attention to the situation of the Demon Emperor. The length and width of the blades rapidly increased. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a giant with sharp blades. To be precise, he was a giant humanoid monster. The back of his hands and arms were curved sharp blades that looked like dragon thorns or sharp knives. He roared and rammed into the black mist. His sharp blade glowed red and burst into flames, tearing the black mist apart in an instant, revealing Crimson Moon, who looked like she was made of ink. The black mucus on her face faded, revealing a pale and somewhat ugly face. She stared at Dean with resentment and murderously said, "How dare you sneak attack me? No one can save you today." Dean didn't say a word and attacked crazily. The burning blades turned into thousands of cold lights that covered Crimson Moon's body. Crimson Moon roared. Her originally crisp female voice became hoarse at this moment, like a mad beast, without the slightest shadow of a human voice. The next moment, her body changed. Her arms and legs bent into multi-segmented claws, and 12 black wings grew out her back, but there was a thick mucus membrane between the wings. An unusually indifferent face appeared behind her head. Dean knew this face. It was the disappeared burrow. Dean was startled. He seemed to think of something and fell cold. He said in a deep voice, "You're not Crimson Moon. You BOLO. You're wrong. I'm both her and BOLO." Crimson Moon was no longer standing upright. Instead, she was crawling on the ground. The one who spoke was Bolo's female voice. Although it was a man's face, it was Crimson Moon's female voice. Our memories merged into one. She devoured me. Little did she know that I had already expected her to flip through my memories. I deliberately sent her to her death. Only in death can we merge into one. My Dana and I will never be separated. Her voice was full of affection towards the end. Dean sneered. Your Dana died a long time ago. Crimson Moon is just a substitute you made. Although I don't know how you devoured her memories, this body is still hers. She was just confused by her memories and thought you were you. Hee, don't even think about using such words to disturb my thoughts. You don't understand my current state at all. Even though Crimson Moon is a replica that I created, she has inherited all of Dana's memories. Memories are the core that separates each person. Outer appearance is just flesh and blood that hasn't rotted. It's all the same. The reason why you are you is because your memories tell you that you are you. If it were any other memories, would you still be you? Crimson Moon sneered. She wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, she continued to demonize her body. Her physique became bigger and bigger. Memories are just the past. Only when the body and memories combine can your future thoughts be your own. Dean looked at her coldly and said, Your Dana died a long time ago. You intercepted her memory and gave it to Feiyu, but you only preserve her past. But if Feiyu's memory is mixed with your Dana's, will it still be your complete Dana? You're just deceiving yourself. Bullshit. Crimson Moon suddenly flew into a rage, and Boluo's face emitted Crimson Moon's shrill female voice. You don't understand anything. You're just a lucky child who was blessed by the heavens, a divine fetus that was created by them. You obtained everything from the very beginning. So how can you possibly understand me? How could you understand how perfect my current state is? You don't know what is eternal and what is resurrection. You're just a waste who got a tool but doesn't know how to use it. I'm going to eat you and let you feel what is true perfection in my body. You're crazy. Dean sneered. I don't know what you set up in your own memory to hypnotize Crimson Moon's memory and make her think that you've usurped her body. But you're dead. You died when she killed your body. You're just a clown living in her memory. Your Dana died a long time ago. You've left nothing behind. Real Crimson Moon, wake up. At the end of his words, he suddenly roared. Crimson Moon's movements suddenly stiffened, but she soon giggled like a ghost chewing on a bone. You wanted to stir my thoughts. Little do you know that I've been giving you opportunities to stall for time. Now it's time for you to die. Chapter 1196. How would you know that I'm also deliberately letting you stall for time? Dean grinned slightly. Facing the white silk threads that were sweeping across the sky, he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a raging flame. This flame was like a waterfall pouring down. The fire was monstrous, rolling half of the sky. The first white silk that touched the flame was quickly ignited, burned, and turned into ashes before it had time to exert its effect. Through his X-ray vision, Dean had already seen the structure of Crimson Moon's body. This white silk was both sharp and soft. His splitting blade couldn't cut it, but the white silk could entangle his body and cut it into countless pieces. If it was just a king who was good at physical attacks, this move alone was enough to easily kill him. But the flame that Dean brewed just happened to restrain the white silk. Dean had long known that Crimson Moon's core ability was Dream Breeder. This should be the ability she was most proficient in. Although people like Crimson Moon who had a divine body could control their body to learn any ability, no matter how many abilities she learned, she would still be proficient in the first ability she mastered. Just like his control of the splitting blade, he was most partial to it. Dream Breeder was the evolution of Black Weaver. Its original form was that of a spider. Black Weaver was good at drilling into the ground and spitting silk, which was inclined to escape and support. Dream Breeder's ability was many times optimized in this aspect. Not only could it drill into the ground and spit silk, but it also came with a strange neurotoxin that could see other people's memories and make others fall into confusion, like entering a dream. This poison was extremely strong and incurable. A little bit of it would be infected. If one was attacked by her poisonous thorns in battle, they would immediately be confused. Even if it was only a short confusion, it would be fatal. However, this kind of poison attack for a divine body like Dean, as long as he thought of a way to prevent it, he would not be infected. He could build a barrier in his body to isolate the poison. However, Crimson Moon obviously optimized the basic ability of the Dream Breeder. Whether it was the white silk or the core poison attack, it was very different from the ordinary Dream Breeder. This poison was like a corrosive acid, and the speed of erosion was enough to quickly destroy the barriers that Dean built. However, the power of the flame was huge. As one of the basic elements of the world, as long as the temperature was high enough, in theory, it could burn everything. Countless white threads were burned by the flames and quickly melted. Although the white threads were extremely tough, they were quickly burned to ashes like water in front of the flames. On the back of Crimson Moon's head, Burrow's face sank, but he didn't stop spitting silk. But this time, the silk was divided into 3 directions. One part of the white silk rushed towards the flames. This part of the white silk was covered with a dense cold air. The other 2 parts of the white silk extended extremely long, one on the left and one on the right, and outflanked Dean like 2 snow-white long ribbons, forming a circle with a diameter of several hundred meters. The white silk quickly widened and formed a large ball, wrapping Dean and Crimson Moon inside. It was 1,000 meters in diameter. The white silk secreted a strange waxy yellow mucus. When the flickering flame touched the waxy yellow mucus, it was instantly extinguished. The blazing heat brought about by the raging flames soared several times as the environment was sealed. It was as if they were in a sea of fire. Although the temperature had risen, Dean frowned. He immediately understood Crimson Moon's intention. She wanted to isolate the air and wait for the air inside the white silk ball to burn out. Then the flame would be extinguished, and he would be at her mercy. This huge ball of white silk was like a giant cocoon. Oomph. Dean snorted coldly. He suddenly turned around and slashed at the inner wall of the white silk with a blazing red cutting blade. The white silk ball was soft to the touch. His cutting blade quickly sank deep into it. The thickness of the white silk ball was much thicker than what he had seen before. In this short period of time, the latter had not only constructed such a large white silk ball, but also expanded its thickness by more than 100 times. Moreover, his X-ray vision was blocked by the waxy yellow mucus. He couldn't continue to penetrate it. His line of sight was actually yellow, and the swaying made him a little dizzy. He had to stop using his X-ray vision to look at the white silk ball. This was originally intended to be used to deal with Iphonius and that old dog Lin Chongsheng. I didn't expect to use it on a semi-finished product like you. You deserve to die 1,000 times. Even if you die 1,000 times, you won't be pitted. Burrow sneered. Dean's face was gloomy. He waved a few more cutting blades, but they sank deep into the white silk ball again. When he tried to pull them out, there seemed to be thousands of hands inside the white silk ball. They grabbed the blades, and he couldn't pull them out. It's useless. No matter how sharp your attack is, you can't break the divine cage that I've carefully prepared. I've painstakingly thought of this specifically to deal with you God's fetuses. No matter how many abilities you have, no matter how many changes you have, you can't escape from my divine cage. Burrow laughed sinisterly. At this time, the flame inside the white silk ball was rapidly shrinking. Behind the flame, Crimson Moon's figure was faintly discernible. Her body had merged with the white silk ball, and only her head was sticking out as if it was embedded in the inner wall of the white silk ball. The face on this head was Burrow's. Dean tried to heat up the blades that were sunk deep into the white silk ball. The powerful tension suddenly loosened, but the next moment, he suddenly felt the heat in the blades quickly disappear. It's useless. My divine thread can absorb heat. Unless you can instantly erupt with the kind of heat like the Candle Dragon Lord did before his death, you can't destroy my divine cage. However, if you want to erupt with that kind of heat, your thoughts will also be burned until they become blurred. Stop thinking, just like the Candle Dragon Lord. You'll become a human-shaped sun and keep burning until your body's energy is completely exhausted and you dissipate between heaven and earth, leaving nothing behind. Burrow laughed strangely. While he was speaking, the flame that Dean had previously spat out gradually extinguished. The inside of the ball became pitch black, and the air had been burned out. The darkness didn't affect Dean's vision. He saw that where Crimson Moon's body was, the inner wall of the white silk ball was slightly squirming, and sharp white silk stretched out from inside, aiming at him like a spear. Without flames, this white silk cage was Crimson Moon's domain, and she ruled over everything. For Dean and Crimson Moon, the temporary lack of oxygen was just a trivial matter, and it didn't affect their movements. Do you think that without air, there won't be flames? Dean suddenly opened his mouth, with a bit of ridicule in his eyes. If that was the case, the Fire Dragon country would have long been extinct. Burrow sneered slightly, then continued to consume your body. Without needing her to say anything, Dean had already released the oxygen stored in his blood. At the same time, he constructed a large amount of gas in his body and released it along with the oxygen in his blood. At the same time, the flames also illuminated the entire divine cage. The erect white silk around Crimson Moon was like a viper, and there was no lack of them. She just looked at Dean with a sneer, waiting for him to exhaust his body. Dean also knew that this wasn't a long-term solution. He couldn't create gas endlessly. Taking advantage of the moment when the flames counterbalanced Crimson Moon, he demonized several sharp blades on his body, and each blade was suffused with cold air. Water couldn't cut it, but ice could. Puff, puff, puff. The ice blades instantly penetrated the white silk ball, and the released cold air also filled the air in an instant, freezing and hardening the white silk ball. Dean once again waved several scorching red blades and cut the frozen white silk ball, immediately cutting open a few cracks. Dean's eyes lit up, and he immediately increased his strength. Several of the sharp blades deeply embedded in the white silk ball also released cold air, expanding the frozen area. Haha, do you think that if I think of flames, I won't consider ice? Burrow suddenly sneered. The next moment, Dean felt the frozen white silk ball quickly soften, as if the cold air inside had been sucked out. Chapter 1197. Dean frowned and suddenly thought of something. His face changed and became completely gloomy. He cut off the dozens of sharp blades and allowed them to be absorbed into the swamp-like white silk blade wall. He didn't attack again and quietly waited for the flames to extinguish. His mind was quickly thinking of a new method. Why didn't you continue to attack? Burrow narrowed his eyes and grinned. It seems that with your intelligence, you've already noticed it. Unfortunately, it's useless even if you know. It will only make you more desperate. You're like a flying insect struggling on a spider's web, watching the spider crawl over but unable to move. Dean was silent and didn't have any extra thoughts to pay attention to her. What Crimson Moon said was right. His current situation was like a flying insect on a spider's web, imprisoned in this white silk blade wall. The previous few attacks also made him aware of the uniqueness of this white silk blade wall. No wonder it was called God's Cage by Crimson Moon. It was indeed worthy of this name. Even he couldn't think of a way to break it in a short time. Didn't you notice that even if you didn't attack, your life energy is quietly flowing away? My divine cage has several layers. The flames and ice that you released before were all absorbed and stored by me. Just my own energy is enough to eat you up, not to mention that you gave me so much energy. It's a pity that you're too smart and noticed it too early. Otherwise, if you attack me a few more times, my divine cage would be even more secure. Burrow's smile was very exaggerated, but his eyes were extremely cold. He was like a cold-blooded animal looking at its prey. Dean suddenly felt that his body's heat was escaping bit by bit. The surroundings were dark, but this darkness wasn't just visual darkness. It was real dark matter. Even under the sunlight, it still existed. This darkness was like the black fog released by Crimson Moon, but the density wasn't as strong. So he didn't notice it because he was focused on the white silk blade wall. But even if Burrow didn't say it, he would soon notice it after he stopped attacking. This is the combination of Burrow's dark ability. It's really scary when the two abilities reach the extreme. Dean's eyes were dignified. His eyes quickly decomposed the dark matter around him. At the same time, his body quickly simulated the decomposed dark matter and released a dark matter mucous membrane to protect himself like a bubble. The dark matter gradually nibbled away at his body, but his heart gradually sank. The thickness of Crimson Moon's divine cage was beyond his imagination. Just the splitting blade alone would not be able to tear it apart, and if he attached energy to the blade, the energy would be absorbed by the white silk blade wall. Simply put, both physical and energy attacks would be rendered useless, and energy attacks would instead become Crimson Moon's nourishment. From this point of view, his current situation was practically a dead end. However, he didn't just sit and wait for death. After a short moment of consideration, before the flames were extinguished, he abruptly transformed into a huge blade that was tens of meters long and fiercely slashed at the white silk blade wall. The blade quickly broke the surface of the blade wall. After penetrating 7 or 8 meters, it gradually lost its strength. The power of the blade was weakened layer by layer, unable to pierce deeper. He wanted to use brute force to push deeper, but he felt that the resistance was stronger. He barely pushed deeper for less than 2 meters, and there was a feeling of exhaustion. However, from the feeling of the blade, there was still no sign of piercing through. When he wanted to pull back the blade, it was already stuck. A large amount of sticky force pulled it out, and he couldn't drag it out. He could only cut off the part of the blade that had penetrated deep, and the rest of the blade retracted back into his body. The next moment, a ruby-like substance appeared outside his body. All the splitting blades on his body retracted and turned into crystals that covered his body. At the same time, a few crystals extended from his body, shining obliquely at each other. On the other side, when Burrow saw the strange appearance of Dean, he reacted extremely quickly. He seemed to have thought of something, and the white silk blade wall around Dean suddenly slightly wriggled. Dean didn't have time to explore the strange shape of the white silk blade wall. He took a deep breath and suddenly converged the accumulated energy in his body into a beam. Suddenly, a fist-sized ruby ejected from his forehead. The beam of light passed through the complex structure of the ruby and instantly ejected more than a dozen times, reaching the limit that the ruby structure could bear. It rushed out of the body and was refracted by several concave crystals that Dean had magically transformed into. Finally, the last concave crystal was smashed and turned into a bucket-thick red beam of light that flew towards the white silk blade wall in front of him. Puff! The beam of light instantly penetrated the white silk blade wall and suddenly pierced a huge hole, but the white silk blade wall also instantly wriggled crazily. Dean saw that the beam of light penetrated tens of meters deep and then suddenly dissipated. The energy was exhausted, and at the end of the depth was still the white silk blade wall. It didn't penetrate. Dean felt a chill in his heart. It was somewhat unbelievable, but the next moment he suddenly thought of something. His whole body suddenly went berserk, and a cutting blade extended out and hit the white silk blade wall hundreds of meters away. Bang! More than a dozen cutting blades like gears plunged into the rippling white silk blade wall and suddenly penetrated 4 or 5 meters deep and then suddenly loosened, unexpectedly piercing through the cage. Dean's eyes burst out with light, and just as he was about to drill out, he felt soft and sticky white silk blade wall from the side, covering the front end of the cutting blade wall. His eyes were red, and he tried to push out, but the deeper he sank, as if it would never end. Damn it! He roared violently, but reason controlled him to timely cut off the connection with the cutting blade wall and withdraw. That was close. On the other side, Burrow took a light breath and put away the strange smile on his face. He looked at Dean with some admiration. Almost let you escape, But fortunately, I made up in time. Unfortunately, you shouldn't be able to launch that kind of attack a second time, right? Even if you can, I'm already prepared, and I won't give you any chance." Dean's face was extremely ugly. Previously, when the solar ray did not penetrate the white silk blade wall, he felt it was unbelievable. But soon he remembered that this cage was woven from the spider silk that Crimson Moon spat out. These spider silk were like her hands and feet, and they rotated according to her thoughts. In other words, the previously balanced and round cage was weakened at that moment and shifted to the place where the solar ray attacked. That was the weakest moment of the divine cage, and when he reacted and attacked, Burrow had also reacted and made up for it in time. All of this happened in an instant. If he could react a thousandth of a second earlier, maybe he would have rushed out at this moment. Originally, it would take a little more time to kill you, but you just gave me such a strong energy, and it accelerated your death. Burrow smiled. The two idiots outside are still quietly watching and don't want to help. They are afraid of wasting their strength. They overestimate you and underestimate me. Once I eat you, my body's energy will surpass theirs, and at that time, they will pay the price for standing idly by. I will avenge you. Dean clenched his teeth, and his heart was incomparably angry. If the Demon Emperor and Lin Changsheng attacked at this moment, it would be very easy to tear this cage apart. But they were confronting each other, and no one was willing to help. The possibility of him being saved was almost zero. When you ran away from me, I wanted to let you live, but you brought about your own death. Now from a small abyss, you have become a demigod that surpasses the king. But unfortunately, you were still ended by me. Burrow said with a smile, "This is your fate. You are a supporting role, and no matter how hard you work, you will eventually become my stepping stone and help me to reach an unprecedented level of life." As he spoke, all the white silk inside the white silk blade wall stood up like hundreds of millions of white needles and aimed at Dean. Dean was silent. Perhaps it was his nature, or perhaps it was because of his experiences over the years, but he always felt that he was rational at all times. So although he was angry, he knew that the Demon Emperor and Lin Changsheng wouldn't help him. So he saw the desperate situation he was in. Unwilling, sullen, angry, all kinds of emotions intertwined in his heart. But more than that, he was unwilling. He had suffered so much, abandoned everything, and struggled until now. But he was going to die here. It was like all the villains in the story would eventually die. Was it because he had done too many bad things and killed too many innocent people, so he couldn't escape retribution? But who would retribution Crimson Moon? The Demon Emperor or Lin Changsheng? Then, who would retribution them? Although unwilling, he knew that he didn't have the opportunity to find the answer. What made him painful was that he would never have the opportunity to see her again, even before he died. Without him in this world, who would take care of the corpse king that wandered alone in the wilderness? Compared to the millions of lives in this world, how insignificant were the two of them? In the end, I'm still a loser. Dean bowed his head, sighed, and smiled bitterly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless white silk needles flew over, as if they would instantly poke him into a hornet's nest. But when he bowed his head, a strong flame spread out from his body, and then swept out, turning into a soaring flame that soared into the sky and instantly enveloped his whole body. The monstrous flame burned to a height of hundreds of meters, and the flame was about to touch the white silk blade wall above him. The white silk needles that were ejected from the surroundings were immediately burned to ashes by the flame, and all of them were submerged. Continued to struggle. Burrow licked his lips, and his eyes showed excitement. At this time, the flame on Dean's body didn't stop, but turned into a flame tornado, and he stood in the center of the storm. The flame became bigger and bigger, and the temperature became higher and higher. The surrounding waxy yellow mucus on the white silk blade wall seemed to dry up. Huh? Burrow frowned, and the excitement on his face disappeared. He faintly felt that something was wrong. The temperature of the flame continued to rise, and there was no sign of stopping. He suddenly realized Dean's thoughts, and his face distorted in anger. Do you want to burn yourself to ashes like Candle Dragon Lord? Dean calmly stood in the center of the flame tornado and quietly looked at Burrow. Unfortunately, I can't kill you, but at least I can make you suffer heavy losses. Beast! Burrow roared, his voice hysterical. Hurry up and stop. I can let you live. No need. Dean gently looked at him and slowly closed his eyes. He felt the blood and bones in his body burning. He controlled the cells to divide and continued to demonize the limbs as fuel. The temperature of his body continued to rise, and it was getting more and more exuberant. His body was exceeding the limit again and again as the demonized limbs were used as fuel. His heart violently beat as if it was about to be torn apart. The pain made him feel suffocated. At this point, even if his heart exploded, it would not be surprising to him. He tried to turn his heart into a burning flame, but he found that he could not control the change. It was like an independent thing in his body, a parasite on his body. I hope I can burn you too, Dean muttered. Chapter 1198. Body T is a container. Through the unique X of the heart, Dean thought of this point, and the idea of a container reminded him of a survival possibility X. That was to create a container that could not be burned by flames, and seal his brain in it. This inspiration was also related to Crimson Moon's special situation. Delta, his body T fell into an endless loop of nature like Candle Dragon Lord, constantly splitting, recreating, and then burning. However, there was a limit to the body T. When the potential of the body T was exhausted, it could not continue to split, and the flame of the body T would gradually extinguish. However, during this process, the consciousness of the brain had long been burned by the high temperature and stopped thinking. All the hippocampal T would also be burned out, and the memory would disappear. However, if there was a container that could seal the brain and prevent it from being burned by the flame until thinking stopped, he could stop his own spontaneous combustion. The purpose of his spontaneous combustion was to break through the limit of the body T, reach an extremely terrifying temperature, destroy Crimson Moon's divine cage, and break through the cage. If his consciousness could wake up in time when the divine cage was destroyed, he could stop the continued spontaneous combustion of the body T, and he could save his life. Although he would face the next battle, the Demon Emperor and Lin Changsheng would not let him go. At least he could live for a while longer. The willpower to survive made him unwilling to give up easily. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, he would want to grasp it. What should I use as a container? Dean thought quickly. He felt that the flame had burned to the point where he could not bear it, and the severe pain all over his body made it extremely difficult and painful for him to think. It was like thinking about how to write an academic award when his brain was about to explode. However, his willpower was extraordinary. He felt that his teeth were almost crushed, but he endured the severe pain. The first thing he thought of was ice, which was the opposite of the flame, and was the most suitable as a container, but he quickly rejected it. Then he thought of stone, and quickly rejected it again. With his ability, he could not construct a stone that could isolate heat. Most of the stone's heating process was very fast, especially at this moment in such a terrifying high temperature. If he constructed the skull into a stone, the brain tissue inside would probably be boiled. He was thinking about the materials one by one. At this time, Burrow's furious roars continuously rang out, shouting at him to stop, even tempting him, begging him, but all of this was thrown to the back of his mind, not paying him any attention. Very soon, he suddenly realized that he had made a mistake. It was almost impossible to find a material that could isolate this terrifying heat, and it was also not something that he could construct with his current ability. In the end, he thought of the ice that he had considered from the very beginning. Although the ice would quickly evaporate due to the high temperature, it was the most suitable method at the moment. He planned to use the ice to seal his brain, and after the high temperature melted the ice, if Crimson Moon's divine cage was not destroyed, then he could only continue to burn and be consumed by the flames. S3. If the divine cage was broken, he could stop the spontaneous combustion and save his life. Thinking of this, he immediately transformed his tea body into a strange shape, like a gourd-shaped monster, with a huge head that took up nearly half of its body. The surface was still burning with flames, but the inner layer was filled with low-temperature airflow, and the air pressure was extremely low. The layer that was burning on the surface was formed into ice, and the temperature of this ice was also lower than 0 degrees due to the extremely low temperature of the environment, so the rate of burning was slightly slower. He constructed a total of 3 ice barriers, each with an extremely small space between them, and sealed a small lump of R-sphere that contained all of the brain tissue inside. The surface of this R-sphere was also covered with a layer of insulation material that blocked out the cold air, preventing the brain tissue from freezing. And because this lump of brain tissue was hidden the deepest, it had already lost contact with the tea body, like a completely sealed and isolated tissue. At this moment, the part that was responsible for controlling the tea body was another part of the brain tissue that he had replicated. In other words, from now on, everything that he experienced would be completely destroyed along with this part of his consciousness, and would not be known by his revived self. However, he had already stored everything that was going to happen and what he was going to do in advance in his origin memory, just like taking precautions. When his origin consciousness awakened, it would also know what he had done before and what he was going to do next. All of this was completed in a few seconds. In this extreme survival state, his potential was completely squeezed out, and he no longer cared about the burden on his heart. He moved his tea body with all his strength. The outermost ice barrier that was constructed did not last for more than half a second before it was burned into steam. In the end, even the white steam was burned away, and even the second layer of ice barrier was rapidly melting. However, this part of his consciousness was responsible for constantly rebuilding the ice barrier, and when the ice barrier melted, a new ice barrier would be rebuilt. Furthermore, the limbs that were constantly demonizing on the surface of his skin were still burning like firewood. From the outside, it was impossible to see the structure of his brain. Even though Crimson Moon had mastered the ability to see through things, she was still unable to see through the flames and the constantly demonizing limbs on the surface of his skin. These constantly demonizing and burning limbs were like walls that were constantly being erected. Before her vision could completely penetrate through, new walls would rise up to block her vision, and she would need to penetrate through again. It was completely impossible to see inside his head, and it was enough to deceive everyone. Bastard! Burrow felt the heat of the tea body, and his face was so hot that it felt like it was on fire. In his sight, there was a monstrous tornado of flames that was more vigorous than the previous one, and it almost occupied the entire cage. He did not even care about Dudian taking the opportunity to escape, and quietly released a large number of pinhole-like holes in the cage to vent the heat, but it was still a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. You will really die if you continue like this. Nothing will be left, and you will die very thoroughly. I can let you live. I promise. I promise you. Burrow was flustered and exasperated, and shouted loudly. But Dudian was like a silent stone, still burning in silence, and did not respond. It seemed that he was determined. Soon, the inner wall of the white silk gradually cracked, and he had to release a large amount of cold air to extinguish the fire, but it did not last long before he felt the signs of burning again. If he continued to persist, he would be burned together with Dudian. After roaring for another minute, Burrow saw that Dudian's tea body had been deformed by the flames, and the demonized limbs had stopped reproducing. Only the tea body was still burning, and the temperature at this moment was high enough to paralyze all the functions of the creator's mech. Even if other kings appeared in the cage, they would be burned alive. S3, damn it. Burrow had a feeling of madness. Dudian had made him suffer again and again. He thought that he could use his unique skill to kill Dudian and eat his body to fill up the gap, but Dudian didn't leave anything for him. Instead, his cage was damaged and most of his energy was consumed. If the Devil Emperor and Lin Chongsheng besieged him, then he would be doomed. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. Dudian's appearance at the moment, and the demonization of the T-body had stopped. Obviously, he had stopped thinking, and his consciousness was blurred. The T-body was maintaining the previous willpower and was burning instinctively. Once it was completely burned out, there would be nothing left. He couldn't stop this process unless he used the cold air that was more terrifying than Dudian's. But that was impossible. Only a real god could do that, and that was the perfect life that they were pursuing. He wanted to grab Dudian and crush him inch by inch, but in the end he quickly untied the cage. He didn't want to compete with a spontaneously combusting bomb. His reason told him that he should think about how to deal with the next trouble. This was the necessary calmness and rationality of a superior. He should stop the damage in time, and not be immersed in anger, and lose more things, or even lose his life. When the divine cage was released, the demon emperor and Lin Changsheng immediately felt a monstrous wave of flames sweeping toward them. Their expressions changed as they quickly retreated over a kilometer. They saw Crimson Moon retract her white threads and retreat to the other side of the flames. Her body was blurred by the flames, and they couldn't see her clearly. They didn't continue to pay attention to Crimson Moon. Instead, their attention was drawn to the flames. It was too fierce. The flame tornado instantly became wilder as it came into contact with the air. It was like the flame of a bomb had left the shell of the bomb and suddenly erupted. The tornado that was originally hundreds of meters high and tens of meters wide suddenly became thousands of meters high and hundreds of meters wide. The temperature released seemed to sweep the whole world, and it was expanding at an alarming speed. Everything in the air was burning and seemed to become the medium of the flame transmission. Spontaneous combustion. The Devil Emperor's face slightly changed, and his eyes flashed with a trace of dignified look. He quickly recovered from the shock of Du Dian's spontaneous combustion and looked for Crimson Moon's figure behind the flame. Chapter 1199. Icebird looked at the sea of fire with a gloomy face. Her special visual structure allowed her to see the figure in the center of the fire. It was Dean, whose body was melting like a candle. She didn't expect this cunning and vicious kid to use such an extreme way to destroy himself. From the intensity of the fire, it was obvious that he was burning uncontrollably, just like the Candle Dragon Lord in the underground base. If Dean died, she would lose a spare tire and a way to fight back against the Demon Emperor. Thinking of this, her eyes flickered and she searched behind the sea of fire. At this moment, whether it was the Demon Emperor or Lin Changsheng, their eyes only stayed on Dean, who was in the sea of fire. For a very short time, they no longer paid attention to this dead person. Therefore, they didn't notice that Dean's huge head in the sea of fire was slowly cracking. White steam was emitting from inside, but before the steam rose, it was burned away in an instant. Sleeping in the endless darkness and recovering in the fire, Dean felt as if he had slept for tens of thousands of years. When he woke up, the first thing he felt was an intense burning pain and a terrifying temperature that was about to melt his body. He instinctively quickly constructed a layer of ice to cool down, and at the same time, the chaotic memories in his mind were quickly sorted out. The last memory was the words he foretold himself, telling the current situation he would face after waking up. When he saw this memory, he completely woke up. The first thing he did was to look at the situation outside. When he saw the endless sea of fire, he couldn't help but change his expression. Soon, his burning eyes saw several figures thousands of meters away from the sea of fire. Icebird Lin Changsheng and the Demon Emperor were standing on one side, hundreds of meters away from each other, while Crimson Moon was at the other end of the sea of fire. At this moment, she was constantly spitting out translucent silk in the air, seemingly building some kind of trap. Dean was a little relieved when he saw that they didn't come to attack him, but he was quickly pulled back by the burning sensation in his body. He immediately controlled the cells in his body to stop dividing and burning, but when his willpower was transmitted, his body didn't respond. His face suddenly changed, and he suddenly thought of something. He tried to control his body to raise his arm, but found that his arm only moved a little, and the response was weak. The temperature is too high, and my body is burning out of control. Dean felt that the situation was critical. He quickly used the tissues in his brain to magically create stem cell-like tissues and injected them into his body to construct nerves in his flesh and blood. But as soon as the nerves were constructed, they were burned to ashes by the high temperature like cotton thread in a flame. No, I have to cool down first. The temperature here is too high. I have to leave this place first. Dean's thoughts turned very fast. The first thing he did was to construct 2 ice-covered wings on his head. The wings themselves were made from the structure of the magic insect spaceship. The ignition point of the wings was extremely high. When the wings were constructed, they quickly heated up and became scalding red. However, they didn't melt. Dudian immediately controlled his wings and flew into the distance. Whew! The wings flapped with flames, carrying his body far away. The changes in the sea of fire immediately attracted the attention of Lin Changsheng, the Demon Emperor, and Crimson Moon. When they saw that Dean was not dead, the 3 were shocked and incredulous. Especially Crimson Moon, who was shocked at the same time, suddenly revealed a crazy killing intent in her eyes. But in the end, she still held back. Whether Dean was dead or not, she would have to face the next trouble. Although Dean survived, if she killed him at this moment, she would be dragged into the sea of fire. Even if he didn't die, he would be burned off a layer of skin, which was extremely disadvantageous to the next action. This cunning boy. Icebird's eyes flashed with cold light. Her killing intent towards Dean was even stronger, but she didn't make a move. The shock on the Demon Emperor's face quickly disappeared. He took a deep look at the figure struggling to fly in the sea of fire, and his expression returned to calmness. No one could read his thoughts. Whoosh! Dean swooped down to the ground and quickly escaped from the sea of fire in midair. All of this happened in a very short time. From the time he broke free from Crimson Moon's divine cage to now, it was less than 10 seconds. He felt that he had bet on the right thing. Crimson Moon didn't dare to waste too much energy to kill him, but now it was urgent to reverse the spontaneous combustion of his body. He used his brain tissue to constantly demonize new cells, and then used the new cells to construct the ice magic limbs to reduce the heat around his body. Boom! His body hit the ground hard, like a flaming meteorite falling. After landing and smashing a deep pit, the spontaneous combustion of his body quickly ignited the surrounding weeds and other combustibles, and the fire quickly spread in all directions. No, my body is about to burn through. Dean felt like his body was completely dead and uncontrollable. After all, he didn't have a complete divine body. He was missing a heart, so he couldn't directly abandon this body. Otherwise, he could only turn into a parasite and live in the body of another life, robbing other lives to survive. But in that case, his divine body would be even more incomplete. The temperature can't drop, and I can't construct the nervous system to control the body. Damn it, will it only stop when I'm completely burned? Dean's face was ugly. The burning flames on his body burned his brain, making it feel like it was twisted by needles. The pain was unbearable, and it was extremely difficult for him to think calmly. If it were an ordinary person, they would have held their head and screamed in confusion. What's wrong? Do you need my help? Suddenly, a cold voice came from midair. Dean was shocked. He looked up and saw Icebird, Demon Emperor, and Crimson Moon descending at the same time. They were looking down at him from midair. It seemed like they had no intention of attacking, but it seemed like they would attack at the same time. It's more than enough for me to drag you down with me. Dean clenched his teeth and retaliated against Lin Changsheng, but he was extremely angry in his heart. Is that so? It seems like you don't want to die. Icebird's face changed into Lin Changsheng's, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She said, although I don't know how you can maintain your consciousness in this high temperature, it seems a bit difficult for you to survive. Why don't you just die a quick death? Dean clenched his teeth. From the expressions of the 3, he knew what they meant. If he died from spontaneous combustion, they would not attack him. If he wanted to stop the spontaneous combustion and survive, they would immediately attack and kill him. At this moment, it was extremely difficult for him to stop his own spontaneous combustion, and he was also faced with their coercion. It was like a person who had fallen into the water but was prevented from going ashore by the people on the shore. Although he had thought of this situation when he thought of using spontaneous combustion to break Crimson Moon's divine cage, he was still furious when it actually happened. In the next moment, he no longer controlled his own spontaneous combustion. He suddenly soared into the sky, his whole body burning with flames, and pounced on Crimson Moon on the other side. Crimson Moon was startled and suddenly flew into a rage. The meaning on her face was very obvious. It was clearly Lin Changsheng who provoked you. Why are you fighting me? The Devil Emperor and Lin Changsheng smiled as they saw the situation. They knew that Dean didn't attack Lin Changsheng because if he went all out against Lin Changsheng, the Devil Emperor and Crimson Moon would have no choice but to take action. They didn't want Lin Changsheng to be killed by Dean, and the mechanical heart would be burnt. At that time, Dean would have to face the joint attack of the three of them. But if he went all out against Crimson Moon, they would just stand by and watch. From this, it could be seen that Dean really wanted to find someone to be his scapegoat before he died, and not just die in vain. Crimson Moon quickly thought of this, and her face became extremely ugly. She angrily cursed him as a madman and quickly retreated. She did not fight with Dean, and only wanted to delay him until he spontaneously combusted to death. While dodging, Crimson Moon displayed the Dark Domain, which covered the surrounding area for several miles. Her body flickered in the Dark Domain, making Dean's attacks hit nothing but air. It had to be said that if two people with the same strength wanted to kill each other, unless they fought to the death, it would be almost impossible for the other to kill them. Dean saw through Crimson Moon's plan and became even angrier, but his current state was extremely poor. Half of his body was constantly spontaneously combusting, and he could use very little strength. Crimson Moon was focused on dodging, and he was simply unable to pursue. Perhaps the most desperate and powerless thing was that when he tried his best to drag someone down with him, he was too far behind. Whoosh! His body powerlessly fell to the ground like a pile of mud, and his whole body was still burning with raging flames. The few minutes of pursuit had exhausted the last of his willpower and physical strength. He could only look at Crimson Moon in the sky, who was gradually withdrawing her dark domain. Finally, his eyes gradually became listless, and his consciousness became blurred. It's still over. His remaining consciousness thought bitterly. Finally, his perception slowly shrank, and the whole world became blurry and dark. Then, the light gradually dimmed, and all the beams of light were compressed in front of him, converging into a vague, gentle face. He smiled slightly and wanted to clench his fists and muster up the last bit of strength to fight, but he found that he did not even have the strength to do so. His vision gradually blurred, and his hearing gradually weakened. The whole world seemed to become incomparably dark and silent. Thump, 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 thump. Chapter 1200. A cornered beast struggling on its deathbed. Crimson Moon looked down at Dean, who had fallen to the ground and continued to burn. Silver crescent moon-like pupils appeared in her eyes, and her gaze penetrated through the flames to see Dean, who was in the deepest part of the flames. Seeing that he had already closed his eyes, Crimson Moon heaved a sigh of relief. She knew that he would not be able to continue and would only gradually die. Her gaze also shifted to the Demon Emperor and Lin Changsheng. Omega Delta, Omega. At the same time, the Demon Emperor and Lin Changsheng withdrew their gazes from Dean. They knew that the latter was like a lamp that had run out of oil and there was no way to save him. They immediately stopped paying attention to him and looked at each other. The current situation was like a tripartite confrontation, but Crimson Moon was the weakest one. Without waiting for the Demon Emperor to speak, Crimson Moon spoke first and said to Lin Changsheng, "Now that there are only the three of us left, it's hard to avoid accidents in a chaotic battle. Are you interested in cooperating with me and taking care of Phineas first? The Demon Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly as a chill flashed through them. Lin Changsheng smiled faintly and said, "Why are you working with me and not with your majesty?" Crimson Moon sneered and said, "I call him Majesty because I want him to lead the way. I've been wanting to deal with him for a long time." Lin Changsheng tilted his head and looked at the Demon Emperor, then smiled and said to Crimson Moon, "Why are you confident that I will work with you and not him?" "Because he's stronger," Crimson Moon said indifferently. She did not mind admitting that the Demon Emperor was stronger than her, especially at this moment. "If you work with him, you will have to face him alone after he kills me. But it's different for me. I've exhausted too much of my energy because of this brat, and my strength has been greatly reduced. Once we finish him off, my strength will be reduced again. At that time, if you fight against me, your chances of winning will naturally be higher than his, right?" Lin Changsheng smiled lightly and said, "That's true." The Demon Emperor listened to the conversation between the two of them. He didn't say anything, nor did he raise any conditions. When Crimson Moon invited Lin Changsheng to cooperate with her, he had already considered this point. Thus, he knew that saying anything else would be pointless. He might as well keep quiet. S3, Demon Emperor, you don't have good taste. Lin Changsheng mocked the Demon Emperor beside him after he finished speaking. The Demon Emperor indifferently said, "Don't be too complacent. Who knows, maybe we can join forces to deal with you. There is no absolute hatred between us. As long as the benefits I propose are suitable, she might not cooperate with you." Lin Changsheng raised his brows slightly and said indifferently, "No matter what condition you raise, you will take it back when you achieve your objective. If she's smart enough, she should know this." These words were said for Fei Yu to hear. In fact, Fei Yu knew this even without Lin Changsheng saying it. Instead, Lin Changsheng's tone of voice made her feel extremely uncomfortable. However, playing along was a small matter to her. What was important was the final result. The Demon Emperor clasped his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "If I really wanted to give her benefits, she would definitely agree. That's because she would immediately use the benefits I give her." However what? Lin Changsheng frowned, feeling a bit threatened. "However, I don't want to give it to her," the Demon Emperor indifferently said. "Having another dabbler helping you is nothing to me." Lin Changsheng inwardly breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. Good, Demon Emperor. You really do consider everyone beneath your notice. Since that's the case, let us have a good look at your glory." Chapter 1201. Gulp. The little beast swallowed Dean into its mouth and chewed slightly. The sound of bones being chewed could be heard. Very quickly, it raised its head and gulped it down. Its short body immediately became bigger. It shook its body like a bird shaking its feathers in the cold wind. As it shook, its body gradually grew bigger. It was 1/2 meter tall, and its appearance also became like a human child. It seemed that it had grown a lot in such a short period of time. At this moment, the sounds of an intense battle coming from above its head attracted its attention. Its pure white eyes looked up and saw silver threads shooting out explosively in midair, as well as the surging black fog, as well as the ice walls and cold air sweeping across the sky, as well as the laser-like rays that split apart from them. Wow! The little beast blinked, a little puzzled and a little curious. Soon, a bit of desire appeared in its eyes. It was like a hungry person seeing a delicious meal, and it greedily licked its lips. However, it did not rush up immediately. Instead, it suddenly raised its huge arm that had absorbed the magma and plunged it into the ground. Bang! The ground shook, and the next moment, the ground around it quickly collapsed, as if it had fallen into a bottomless black hole. While the ground was collapsing, its body was also slowly growing, becoming larger and larger. In the blink of an eye, it had grown to a height of nearly 3 meters, and the crater that it had been standing on had now turned into a basin with a diameter of several kilometers. At this time, the demon overlord, Crimson Moon, and Lin Changsheng, who were fighting in midair, also noticed the changes below. They were all shocked. Could it be that Dean could still be resurrected in that kind of situation? When they looked down, they saw that there was a huge funnel-shaped basin on the ground, and at the bottom of the funnel in the center of the basin stood a creature made of magma. Its body seemed to be made of magma that would burst at any time, and they could see the fiery red liquid flowing inside it. It looked like blood, but also like boiling flames. Its body structure was humanoid, and it was not complicated. There was no extra carapace or scales, and it was very simple and smooth. The Demon Emperor, who was being pressured by the Crimson Moon, suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He felt a sense of familiarity from this strange creature, a familiarity that caused him to feel fear. Over the years, apart from the memories of his father, the sea monster that he met when he was young, and the two terrifying monsters that occupied the wasteland outside the border, there was nothing else that made him feel fear. Even if he was targeted by Lin Changsheng's nuclear bomb, he would not feel the slightest bit of fear. At the same time, Crimson Moon, who had unleashed divine threads to attack the Demon Emperor, also felt a trace of inexplicable fear the moment she saw this lava creature. It was as if she were prey being targeted by a hunter or a frog that had encountered a snake. She felt an instinctive sense of fear, which shocked her to no end. Ever since she had completed the final experiment on Dean and defeated Burrow, she had never encountered anything that could frighten her. Even the first time she went to Divine Country to meet the Demon Emperor, she only felt a bit of pressure, not fear. But right now, she was trembling, even wanted to turn around and run. What is this? Is it that kid Dean's demonized body? No, it's impossible for him to give me this kind of feeling. This thing's body structure is so special that it can change at any time. Could it be? Crimson Moon seemed to think of something, and her pupils suddenly shrank. Her face was full of shock, and she even stopped attacking the Demon Emperor for a moment, wondering if she should retreat or not. On the other side, Lin Changsheng did not have the strange feeling of fear that the Demon Emperor and Crimson Moon had. He only felt that this lava creature was a bit strange, and he wondered if it was Dean's demonized form, but no matter how he looked at it, it did not seem like it. He tried to change the structure of his pupils to penetrate the interior of the creature, and when he saw the situation inside, his face suddenly changed, and he said in horror, "Impossible." At this moment, the little beast on the ground twisted its arms and pulled out from the ground. Its magma-like arms were covered with a layer of metal-like material. It looked at its arms, and only a little curiosity showed on its face. The next moment, its arms suddenly shot out sharp, pitch-black thorns, which were the splitting blades that Dean had used before. The next moment, the sharp thorns shrank back and turned into burning flames, and then the flames disappeared, and a cold ice appeared, exuding a strong cold air. Then it turned into metal, rock, and black fog. Among them, there was also a silver thread. If one carefully compared it, they would find that the structure was the same as the silk that Crimson Moon had spat out, and this silver thread just flashed for a moment, then changed into something else. In just a few seconds, its arms had changed into hundreds of different structures, dazzling the eyes of the people watching, and once again shocked the three people in the sky. Impossible. How is this possible? The speed of the construction is so fast. The three people were shocked beyond belief. The arm of the little beast was still constructing new materials, as if it had found a new toy, and it was trying it out. The three people in the sky quickly recovered from the shock, and the demon overlord was the first to react, and he said in a serious tone, "This is an origami, a real origami. It is even more terrifying than the ancestor of the origami of my race. Let's work together to kill it, or else we will all die." "I agree," Crimson Moon said almost immediately. Lin Changsheng looked at the two of them. Thinking of their special identity and body, he sneered in his heart, but he did not reject the demon overlord's suggestion. The divinity that this magma creature showed was far beyond any of them. The so-called divinity was what he called the ultimate life. It referred to the control over the cells, the ability to change genes, the speed of constructing materials, and so on. Theoretically speaking, the gods could create all things, and in a battle between them, the more special and durable the materials that were constructed, the faster the speed, and the higher the chance of winning. This was just like the difference between an ordinary person who could punch fast and another who could punch slow. In the blink of an eye, from the three people fighting each other to working together, it only took a few seconds to decide. The three of them looked at each other and quickly came up with a plan of attack. The demon overlord was the first to rush out, while Crimson Moon surrounded from the side, releasing a large number of silver threads, setting up traps and domains. Chapter 1202. The Demon King swooped down with a murderous aura. The little critter sensed it and raised its head to look at the Demon King. Its white flame-like eyes fell on the Demon King. Suddenly, a sharp blade extended from its arm like a poisonous snake. In an instant, it grew to several hundred meters long and shot towards the Demon King's head. The Demon King snorted coldly. With a wave of his arm, a dark energy slashed out like a crescent moon, cutting the soft blade in half. The little critter didn't seem to have expected that it would be injured. It was stunned for a moment, but very quickly it made its move again. Several strange wings appeared on its back. They were very asymmetrical, as if the wings of different animals were pieced together. There were butterfly-shaped oval wings, bird-shaped wings, and bat-shaped meaty wings. They grew unevenly on its back, carrying its body to soar into the sky. In the air, the little critter collided with the Demon King. The moment they got close, a large number of sharp blades suddenly shot out from the little critter's arms. Each of the blades was covered in flames, like an inescapable net, completely covering the area where the Demon King was. The Demon King's eyes turned cold. The speed at which the magma creature reconstructed its body was beyond his imagination. However, the Demon King was not one to be trifled with. At this moment, the Demon King's body suddenly swelled up. A pair of curved claws grew out from its back. 3 sharp barbs appeared on its forehead, like the horns of a bull. Its body also became more than 10 meters long. Black patterns wrapped around its body, making it look like a wriggling, demonic insect. He raised his hand and shot out a beam of black light that was several meters in diameter. It was filled with the aura of destruction and collided with the sharp blades. The sharp blades that came into contact with the black light were instantly annihilated. There was no sound of impact. It was as if they were silently disintegrated and disappeared. However, the black light did not lose any of its power and continued to fly towards the little critter. The arms of the little beast suddenly folded together, turning into a meaty limb with a diameter of tens of meters. The surface of the limb was covered in flowing lava, and the tip was like a volcanic crater. The instant the black beam of light flew over, the tip suddenly spewed out a large amount of lava. The lava slanted out and actually swallowed the black beam of light gradually. The Demon Emperor heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this scene. Although this strange creature that exuded the aura of the origami gave him an extremely dangerous feeling, and its divinity was extremely high, the substance that it had constructed did not seem to be of a high level. It was as if it had a body full of power, but it was not able to use it properly. In that case, it was not that scary. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and shot out a few more beams of black light from his palm. The little beast's incandescent eyes suddenly narrowed when it saw this scene. In the next moment, it closed its arms and turned into a small volcano. The surface of the volcano no longer showed traces of flowing lava, but was pitch black like iron. When the Demon Emperor's black light beam collided with it, an incomparably huge black light beam suddenly shot out from the top of the volcano. It had a diameter of 20 to 30 meters, far thicker than the black light beam released by the Demon Emperor. With a whoosh, this huge beam of darkness instantly swept past the beam of darkness released by the Demon Emperor, annihilating it before flying towards the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor's pupils constricted. In the instant that the massive beam of darkness slammed into his body twisted violently. Whoosh! The beam of light shot straight into the distance, disappearing into the distant horizon. Lin Changsheng and Fei Yu, who were preparing their attacks, were shocked when they saw this scene. They stared at this strange creature in disbelief. Isn't this evolution ability a little too powerful? It managed to learn the Demon Emperor's unique skill in just one exchange. Somewhere else in the sky, the Demon Emperor's figure materialized from the transparent air. His face was filled with shock, and his complexion was a little pale. He had just barely escaped death, and he had almost died because of his own ability. He looked at this strange creature as if he had seen a ghost. The little beast didn't seem to think that he would still be alive, so it paused for a moment before immediately shifting its cannon to aim at the Demon Emperor again. The Demon Emperor's expression changed as another beam of darkness of the same size shot towards him. However, he was prepared this time, so he immediately dodged and wasn't hit. The little critter fired several shots consecutively. Seeing that there was no effect, it retracted its folded arms and turned around. Suddenly, its legs lengthened and extended towards the ground. It was like two volcanoes made of magma were inserted into the ground. It absorbed the substance of the earth and transformed it into the energy within its body. With the endless supply of matter provided by the ground, its body grew larger and larger. Its arms turned into giant claws that were over 100 meters long, and it swatted towards the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor's expression was ugly, but he didn't take the attack head-on. Instead, he shrunk his body to the size of a normal person, and the moment the claws swatted towards him, he dashed through the gaps between the claws and dodged the attack. The little beast swatted several times in a row, but it didn't hit the Demon Emperor. It seemed to be a little irritated, and it let out a low growl. When it swatted its claws again, the Demon Emperor used the same method as before to evade, but this time, when he dashed through the gaps between the claws, countless sharp blades suddenly appeared in the gaps between the claws and shot towards him. Each blade was covered in a viscous dark substance that looked like jelly. It didn't look like energy, but rather an extremely soft, gelatinous substance. The Demon Emperor's expression changed, and his body abruptly curled up like a small black hurricane, forcibly escaping from the countless blades. The blades were cut in half, and the Demon Emperor's body was covered in countless wounds, but they healed in the blink of an eye. His core hadn't been injured, but the dark annihilation energy that covered the blades had caused great damage to his body. Although he had recovered, the energy within his body had decreased significantly. Rumble. When the little beast was about to swing its claws at the Demon Emperor again, a loud explosion came from the sky. Dark clouds had gathered in the sky 10,000 meters above them, and at this moment, the clouds were filled with thunder and lightning. Violent winds swept through the sky, and it was as if doomsday had arrived. Below the dark clouds, Lin Changsheng was like a god floating high in the sky. He raised his hand, and with a loud rumble, lightning was drawn from the dark clouds to his hand. Then he swung his arm and slashed it down at the little beast below. The little beast was caught off guard and was struck by the lightning, and its body went numb for a moment. But soon, anger appeared in its incandescent eyes. It was clearly angered by Lin Changsheng's attack. It let out a low roar and pounced at Lin Changsheng. Lin Changsheng's expression was indifferent. He didn't seem to do anything, but countless pieces of ice suddenly fell from the dark clouds above his head. When these pieces of ice passed the height of his body, they seemed to be strengthened by an invisible halo of energy. From ordinary ice cubes, they became solid like crystals, and they were incomparably sharp. Under the violent winds around them, they shot toward the little beast like bullets. The little beast raised its huge claw, and a raging flame surged out from it. Countless ice crystals shot out, and the raging flame became erratic, as if it was about to be extinguished. After a few seconds, the raging flame was really extinguished. Seeing this, Lin Changsheng didn't even have time to reveal a happy expression. He saw that the giant claw that was covered in flames had actually turned into ice crystals. No matter how the sharp ice crystals struck the giant claw, they were either dispelled by the smooth giant claw or shattered by the ice crystals, and the giant claw remained unharmed. Chapter 1203. Swoosh! The giant claw slashed across, and snowflakes danced in the air. Lin Chongqing's body flashed with a purple light as he dodged the giant claw. As if he had teleported, he appeared 1,000 meters away. His expression was extremely solemn. The giant claw was now covered with scales, and it was even larger than when it was first formed. Some of the ice crystals that filled the sky shattered, but some directly stuck to the giant claw, piling up into messy spikes. Be careful, its intelligence is not low. The demon emperor rushed over and said coldly. The little critter raised its claw again and was about to slap. Suddenly, countless silver threads flew over and wrapped around the little critter's giant claw and body. The moment they stuck, the silver threads quickly thickened and wrapped around the little critter. The little critter struggled violently, but there were too many silver threads. Moreover, they grew as if they had a life of their own. The more it struggled, the tighter it became. Cut off its legs. Don't let it continue to absorb the matter from the earth. The demon emperor said to Lin Chongqing, who was beside him, and then suddenly swooped down. His arms turned into two huge scimitars. Swoosh! The demon emperor's speed was incomparably fast. He swept past the top of the two lava peaks below the little critter. The peaks were connected to the little critter's body and were no more than 10 meters thick. When the demon emperor swept past, there was a crack sound. The 2 meters wide lava rocks disappeared without a trace and were annihilated into fine powder. The little critter roared in pain, and a large amount of lava dripped down from its severed legs. It wanted to connect to the broken peaks below. At this time, Lin Chongqing, who was on the other side, raised his hand and pulled out a huge ice mountain from the dark clouds. It was like an upside-down pyramid. His 5 fingers, which had turned into withered vines, wrapped around the ice mountain and threw it toward the lava peaks below the little critter. With a loud bang, the iceberg smashed onto the 2 isolated magma peaks. Immediately, the summit of the isolated peaks was broken and nearly half of it collapsed. The little critter's magma limbs that extended down again were also frozen by the iceberg, as if they were amber crystals. But soon, the frozen magma burned through the ice and continued to drip down. The demon emperor saw through the little critter's intention and swooped down once again. A layer of dark luster appeared on his scythe-like arms as he cut off the magma that was about to drip onto the broken mountain peak. The little critter roared angrily. Suddenly, a thorny and sinister rock snake shot out from the dripping magma and pounced toward the demon emperor at an extremely fast speed. The demon emperor's expression was cold. His arms quickly cutting the lava snakes into pieces. Being me. Lin Chongqing condescendingly looked down at the little beast that had more than half of its body wrapped by the silver threads. He looked at its ferocious appearance with its exposed head and snorted coldly. His arms suddenly turned into a 100-meter-long black tentacle. Its surface was covered with layers of black scales. It looked like a giant python, but its tip was a sharp needle that looked like a mouthpiece. It fiercely pierced towards the little beast's head. When the little critter saw the sharp needle in its mouth shooting at it, it suddenly transformed into a giant arm on its head. It clenched its fist and swung it at the incoming attack. But the surface of the black tentacles also transformed into a sharp blade and chopped off the giant arm. The sharp needle in its mouth suddenly detached itself from the black tentacles at lightning speed. It shot out and pierced the top of the little critter's head. The waving giant arm on top of the little critter's head suddenly stopped and froze in midair. The next moment, its head suddenly exploded, and the magma-like red brain matter flowed everywhere on the silver ball. Lin Chongqing heaved a sigh of relief and revealed a trace of smile. This was one of the results of his research. It was derived from the walking corpse virus. The mouthpiece contained his special virus. Any flesh and blood that came into contact with it would react at an extremely fast speed. Like a detonating nuclear weapon, it would quickly invade all tissues and tear them apart. No matter how tough a creature's body was or how soft a demon insect's body structure was, when the cells in the body collapsed, all external defenses would be unable to save them. Only death awaited them. He originally planned to save this trick for the Demon Emperor, but now he had to use it in advance. Fortunately, he had other preparations. Seeing this scene, the Demon Emperor and Fei Yu's eyes turned cold. They took a deep look at Lin Changsheng, and at the same time, they quietly let out a sigh of relief. The sense of threat that this strange origami gave them was several times stronger than Lin Changsheng's. Being able to deal with it made them feel a lot more relieved. Fei Yu's eyebrows twitched, and her expression suddenly changed. She hurriedly said, "Not good. Roar." A furious roar resounded through the heavens and earth, coming from the severed neck of the little beast. A new head covered in lava drilled out from the wound and angrily glared at Lin Changsheng in the sky. It spat out a long tongue, which rapidly transformed into a thorny whip in the air and coiled around Lin Changsheng. Lin Changsheng's expression changed. He reacted quickly and quickly flew up, dodging the thorny whip. However, his expression did not look good. Although the amount of virus in the mouthpiece was only enough to destroy the monster's head, it was still able to reconstruct its head. This meant that the core of the monster's life was not its brain at all. The little critter's attack on Lin Changsheng did not hit its target. Suddenly, countless magma rain shot out from its lower body towards the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor's body swayed, dodging the magma rain with ease. He was not hit. Whenever the little critter tried to connect to the ground, he would interrupt it. If this continued, no matter how strong the divinity of this strange origami was, or how fast it could reconstruct matter, it would still slowly die without any energy. The little critter roared angrily. Its body turned into all kinds of strange limbs, trying to tear apart the silver silk. However, as soon as it tore apart a layer, it would be entangled by another layer of silver silk. Its body was still bound. It tried to use fire and light to attack, but the effect was not great. Fei Yu, Lin Changsheng, and Fei Yu were not weak either. They each created a material that countered the little critter's power to defend and defend. As the strongest people in this world, the knowledge that the little critter had mastered was relatively ordinary. However, as a clone, how could it keep up with the changes of the original? After a few minutes, the little critter's roar gradually weakened. The strength of the attacks it released had also obviously weakened. It was like a cornered beast, completely suppressed by the three of them. Not long after, the three of them seized the opportunity and attacked at the same time. The silver silk danced in the air. The Demon Emperor was like an angel of hell, holding a sharp blade in his hand and weaving through the silver silk, tearing the little critter's body into countless pieces. Lin Changsheng, on the other hand, released ice or light beams to freeze or destroy the torn pieces of flesh. A moment later, there was only a frozen blood clot that was about 7 to 8 meters in size left in the air. It fell into Lin Changsheng's hand. It's finally done. This origami does not seem to have a human consciousness. Lin Changsheng looked at the blood clot in his hand and mumbled to himself. He had vaguely guessed the origin of this strange origami, but he did not say it out loud. The Demon Emperor and Fei Yu looked at the blood clot in his hand. Their eyes were shining brightly. They could tell that this origami was different from the other origami. There was a huge difference between them, and the origami had a special characteristic, which was symbiosis. Chapter 1204. What? Lin Changsheng and the Demon Emperor were both shocked. The situation was out of their expectations, and they could not react in time. Furthermore, the speed of the blood shadow was so fast that they could not even see it with their eyes. If it was coming for them, they would not be able to dodge it either. The two of them quickly looked towards the direction of the blood shadow, and they immediately saw a breathless scene. In the sky filled with dark clouds, a giant red demon was floating in the air. There was a pair of wings on its back, and the wings were a mixture of different demons' wings. They looked like feathers, bats, butterflies, and armor. It was very strange, as if they were pieced together by force. It gave people a feeling of awkwardness and fear. The structure of its body was even weirder. There were many strange eyeballs on its forehead. Some of them were long and thin, like a human's eyes. Some were vertical. Some were like a snake's eyes. Some were like red eyes. Some were like compound eyes. All of them were different. Its mouth was split to the back of its head, revealing all of its sharp teeth. Its body was like a human's, but it had 7 different arms. There was a horn on its chest that was curved like a yak's, and under the horn was a huge mouth that was chewing on a few black legs. The black legs were twitching as if they were struggling, but they were being chewed and swallowed bit by bit, slowly disappearing from the sight of the 2 of them. On both sides of the monster's body, there were extremely thin red cracks, like the veins of magma, extending out in a complicated manner. The other parts of the monster's body were black, like human flesh and blood. There was no shell or hair on the surface. What kind of monster is this? Lin Chongqing's pupils contracted as he felt a terrifying pressure. The demon emperor beside him had a drastic change of expression. Since the beginning of the battle, this was the first time he showed a look of fear. When he heard Lin Chongqing's words, he gulped and said with a trembling voice, "This is the origami just now." "What?" Lin Chongqing was shocked. When he saw the expression on the demon emperor's face, his heart sank a little. He quickly asked, "Are you sure? Didn't we kill the origami just now? Was it just a substitute? That's impossible. How could a substitute have battle consciousness? Moreover, it can't split its consciousness so quickly under our eyes." The demon king was in disbelief as well. In his mind, the image of the lower body of the origami turning into a rain of fire and attacking him appeared. Instantly, he came to his senses. The area covered by the rain of fire was huge, but it did not hit him much. The rest of the rain of fire fell to the ground, but he did not care about it. Now that he thought about it, the origami must have hidden its life core in one of the rain of fire and escaped to the ground. Other than that, there was another possibility. That was the origami had secretly separated its life core and sent it to the depths of the earth when it was fighting against its clones. While the origami was fighting against its clones, the origami had been absorbing the energy from the earth and transforming it into its own energy, allowing the origami to grow at a rapid pace. Only when the origami possessed a terrifying amount of energy that surpassed the origami and the origami did the origami appear before them. No matter which possibility it was, it meant that the 2 worst situations had occurred. Firstly, the origami had extremely high intelligence and was extremely cunning. Secondly, this origami was not the origami he knew. Instead, it was the existence that all the demonic insects and origami had been searching for. A perfect being. To put it simply, this was a true god. A complete, unkillable god with limitless potential. Only a true god could grow at such a frightening rate. Only a true god could absorb the matter from the earth in such a large area and transform it into its own energy. Only a god could construct new matter so quickly and transform its body into any shape with just a thought. Moreover, this god was still growing at a rapid pace. Just this point alone was far beyond the demigods like them who only possessed divinity. In just a short period of time during the battle, the origami had grown to such a terrifying level. The origami had subdued Crimson Moon with a single strike just now. The black limbs that were chewing on the origami's chest were clearly the limbs of Crimson Moon after she had demonized. Although the origami had launched a sneak attack this time, the power that it displayed was not any weaker than them. Moreover, after consuming Crimson Moon, the origami's power would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. In just a short moment, all kinds of thoughts flashed through the Demon Emperor's mind. He gritted his teeth slightly. He did not expect that everything would go according to plan. The Candle Dragon Lord was eliminated, and Crimson Moon was about to be eliminated as well. However, in the end, such a monster suddenly appeared and completely messed up his plans. Moreover, considering the terrifying combat power of this monster. Even if Lin Changsheng was right in front of him, and the hope of becoming a god was within reach, he had no choice but to retreat. This required great courage and perseverance. Countless people were tempted by their desires, but how many of them could restrain their desires? If a normal person could not even live a regular life, how could they restrain their desires? Not to mention the fact that they were in a high position and faced the temptation of their desires all the time. However, the Demon Emperor's willpower was far beyond that of an ordinary person. After planning for so many years, when hope was right in front of him, he suddenly restrained his inner urges and quickly turned around to retreat. As soon as the Demon Emperor's body moved, the origami in midair noticed him. It was as if the origami had seen a delicious meal suddenly crawling out of the plate. Slightly displeased, the origami pounced toward the Demon Emperor. As it raised its hand, its palm turned into a cylinder, from which silver threads shot out all over the sky. The silver threads descended from the sky like a huge screen, covering half of the sky, covering the direction where the Demon Emperor retreated to. Lin Changsheng was slightly stunned. He did not understand why the Demon Emperor would make such a move. Could it be that even if they joined forces, they would not be able to defeat this monster? Soon he thought of something. His expression changed instantly, and he ran in the other direction at full speed. I knew it. Looking at the silver threads that covered the sky, the Demon Emperor's heart sank. He was even more determined to retreat. If one were to say that he still had some reluctance before, then that reluctance was now gone. He immediately unleashed a thick black light, with his body as the center, radiating out in all directions, covering a radius of a few hundred meters. Like a black ball, he crashed into the silver threads that covered the sky. Suddenly, the silver threads turned into black threads, seemingly becoming the same substance as the dark energy released by the Demon Emperor. The black threads gathered together and turned into a giant claw, grabbing the huge black ball. After the black ball was grabbed by the giant claw, it gradually shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye until it completely disappeared. The origami was not happy. Instead, it was startled. Suddenly, it felt something and looked into the distance. It saw an aurora disappearing at the end of the sky like a phantom. In an instant, it turned into a bright light and disappeared completely. It knew that it was too late to give chase. With a low growl, it turned around and looked at Lin Changsheng, who had turned into an ice bird and was running away at high speed. Damn it! Lin Changsheng's expression was ugly. The Demon Emperor was one step ahead of him and had already prepared a backup plan. He tricked the origami and took the opportunity to escape. Now, he was the only one left to face the angry origami alone. Moreover, he did not have the ability to escape like the Demon Emperor. Otherwise, he would not have been caught up by the Demon Emperor. Chapter 12:05. Darkness, burning pain, tearing, warmth. He woke up in a daze and saw a blood-red world around him. This was the color that existed in the human world when light was reflected in his pupils. This color made him instinctively come up with the first thought, I'm not dead? Then he came up with the second thought, where is this place? He tried to look at the world and saw giant blood-red balls filling the surroundings like planets in the universe. There were countless of them, perfectly round and beautiful. He was attracted by this beautiful scenery. He looked at it for a long time and suddenly thought of the third question, why am I here? After this question, he immediately had a new question. Who am I? He became more and more anxious, shocked, and afraid. He could feel that he once existed as an independent individual, an existence that was given a name. However, at this moment, when he wanted to recall his name, his species, and his identity, he found that he couldn't remember anything. There were only some ghost-like fragments that flashed by and were difficult to capture. It was as if something that he was used to had been forgotten, just like that. He used all his strength to think, and suddenly felt the surrounding blood-red planet world fluctuate violently, as if the universe was in turmoil. Countless blood-red planets trembled, followed by bursts of tearing pain. This pain became more and more intense, as if he was completely torn apart. He felt his vision go black, and he completely passed out. After an unknown period of time, he woke up again. After waking up, he still saw the familiar blood-red planet world. After being stunned for a few seconds, he slowly remembered what happened before he passed out. At the same time, some fleeting fragments appeared in his mind. He saw the information in these fragments and suddenly woke up, knowing his true identity. Before he could rejoice, the tearing pain appeared again, and he passed out. After a long time, he woke up again and saw the blood-red world in front of him. The first thought that came up instinctively, I'm not dead? Then, he had a question. Where is this place? Then, he looked at this blood-red world. After a long time, he thought a new question. Who am I? When the blood-colored world shook for the umpteenth time, he fainted again and woke up in a daze. This repeated countless times until the last time he woke up. He saw countless familiar faces as well as a beautiful figure that was engraved in the deepest part of his memory. He finally knew his name. This time, the blood-colored world did not tremble. The world seemed to become extremely silent, and this lasted for a long time. It had been so long that he had pieced together countless memory fragments. While piecing them together, he had also read out the tiny fragments in his memory. He knew that he had fainted and woken up in this blood-red world time and time again. Most of the time when he woke up, he had forgotten who he was and did not know anything. He was like a newborn baby, but there were a few times when he woke up and remembered his identity. However, every time he woke up, before he could think about his current situation, the world around him would shake and tear him into a coma. This blood-colored world seemed extremely unstable and could fluctuate at any time. However, this time, it was stable for a very, very long time. After searching through his memories, he tried to leave this place, but he found that his consciousness could not feel his body at all. He was like a soul floating in the void of space, unable to feel anything. Only every time there was a turbulence would he feel pain. He tried many methods, but without exception, all of them were useless. He could only look at the unchanging blood-colored world in front of him and silently wait for the next turbulence and tearing pain. Perhaps this was the hell after death? There were no 18 levels of Yama, no evil spirits. It was just a boring world, staying forever, waking up and falling asleep repeatedly. Loneliness was far scarier than loneliness. Loneliness was a state of mind. A lonely person could still live an interesting life, but loneliness was numbing. One would not die, nor would one grow old. Perhaps this kind of not being able to die, not being able to move, not being able to do anything, and not being able to improve was the most terrifying and unbearable. The blood-colored world seemed to be frozen. It was so stable that there was not the slightest fluctuation. In the loneliness and dullness, all of his thoughts had run out, and all of his patience had been exhausted. He was even looking forward to the appearance of turbulence. At least, he could still feel the tearing pain, and he could have a different experience. This kind of loneliness not only did not give him a new understanding of life, but it also filled him with an infinite desire for life. If he was given another chance, he would be willing to plan more carefully, more detailed, more ruthless, and more despicable, just to ensure his own survival. After waiting for a few years, or a few decades, or even longer, one day, the solidified and stable blood-colored world fluctuated once again. Seeing this fluctuation, he, who had already become numb and stopped thinking of new ideas, suddenly felt a burst of excitement and anticipation, as if he had woken up from a stone statue. He would rather be unconscious than wait in this lonely world in a daze. The blood-colored world split open, and a large number of colorful balls surged in from the outside. They were slightly smaller than the giant blood-colored ball, and they kept squeezing in front of him. He was a little surprised, as he had never seen this kind of situation before when he was unconscious. The next moment, the pink ball closest to him burst open, and a voice suddenly emerged from it. playing in his ears like an audio. The voice was extremely familiar. It was Crimson Moon. Immediately after, another ball burst open, and an image emerged from it. It was a dark laboratory that looked like hell, with all kinds of broken hands, limbs, eyeballs, and internal organs soaked in medicinal liquid. The other balls burst open one after another, and every ball produced an image or a voice, some of which belonged to Crimson Moon, some of which belonged to an unknown stranger, and some of which belonged to himself. Other than that, in some of the images, he also saw the Demon Emperor, but the Demon Emperor in the images was different from the Demon Emperor he had seen in the Confederation. The Demon Emperor appeared to be much younger, and his temperament was not as reserved and deep as it was now. Instead, the Demon Emperor was like a king who looked down on the world, full of vigor. Other than the Demon Emperor, he also saw a large number of origami corpses, as well as various mysterious halls, dark laboratories, and all kinds of strange experiments. Among them, there were also 7 to 8 white-robed researchers surrounding a 10-meter-tall giant table, dissecting an origami. The upper body of the origami was in the shape of a human, and the ribs on its chest had been cut open, revealing the internal organs inside. Chapter 1206. This is the imperial capital. Seeing the familiar architectural style, he had a guess in his mind. Then he saw some scenes of the wilderness. In this scene, there was a young man with sharp blades all over his body, rushing towards the being in his sight. "This is me." He was startled for a moment. Soon he saw another sea. When his sight rushed out of the sea, he saw the being in his sight looking down at a scale-like body, spitting out a young man with an unsociable temperament. It was him. This familiar background made him suddenly realize that the scenes recorded in the sphere seemed to be the world observed by Crimson Moon's eyes. This was Crimson Moon's memory. But why would the Demon Emperor appear in Crimson Moon's memory? Soon, he thought of another memory in Crimson Moon's body, BOLO. The scene she had seen in the imperial capital and the words spoken by some of the people in the morning court had all been calling the name of the King of Darkness. Clearly, those were Bolo's memories that Crimson Moon had read and recorded in her mind, becoming part of her memories. After that, he saw familiar scenes. Crimson Moon captured him, dissected him in the giant wall of Sylvia, and studied his body. He also saw Crimson Moon judged that his experiment had failed, and after assigning him to the freezer room, she continued with new experiments. In these new experiments, Crimson Moon used a large number of cruel and bloody test subjects. In addition, he also saw Crimson Moon meeting BOLO, fighting him, and devouring him. However, when BOLO died, there was no struggle as imagined. He had seen Crimson Moon's form in the divine cage, and when he saw this scene, he immediately felt that he could read the meaning in Bolo's eyes before he died. It was a kind of indifference, pity, gentleness, and a look of success. Other than that, he also saw his own heart, which was sealed by Crimson Moon. After many experiments, she gradually perfected the structure of her own heart. She left Sylvia and found the corpses of the origami guarding the other giant walls. She mixed the corpses with the ice demon insects and the flame demon insects and fused them into her own body. She occupied another giant wall and used the resources inside to gradually perfect her own body. My heart was destroyed. Dean could not accept what he saw. His heart was sliced by Crimson Moon bit by bit, studied again and again, and in the end, nothing was left. Everything became the sacrifice of the experiment. He would never be able to find his heart again. This was something that he would forever be missing. According to Crimson Moon's memories, Dean saw that after Crimson Moon perfected her body, she went to the Divine Kingdom, challenged the 7 kings, alarmed the Demon Emperor, and was subdued by the Demon Emperor. He had even seen Crimson Moon, the Demon Emperor, and the others discussing the crusade against the Federation. He had even heard Crimson Moon's thoughts and secretly formulated a plan. He quickly skimmed through most of Crimson Moon's life memories, as if they were engraved into his own memory. However, he found that the number of spheres pouring into his mind was still endless. And as the spheres continued to crack, he saw even more scenes. These were Burrow's memories, and from Burrow's eyes, as the first person's perspective, he saw Burrow's life from birth to adulthood. Burrow was born into a noble family in the capital, a true noble family with a noble title. However, Burrow's father's title was only a lowly baron, and his territory was only a few villages and a small river. Unlike other nobles, Burrow's hair was black. His father had blonde hair, and his mother had black hair, but he had inherited his mother's hair color, causing him to grow up under the bullying of his older brother and sister. However, in his father's territory, he was still a noble young master, and the silk clothes he wore were enough to make the commoners in the village extremely envious. There was a beautiful girl in the village who secretly liked him and wrote him a love letter. At a noble's banquet, he saw the girl he had loved his whole life, Dinah. When he saw Dinah, he found that the face was so familiar. It was exactly the same as Crimson Moon, even the hair color was the same. It seemed that every finger on the body, every inch of skin, was exactly the same. The only difference was that Dinah's eyes were very soft. At first glance, he could tell that she was a kind-hearted person, while Crimson Moon's eyes were filled with disdain, arrogance, and domineering dominance. Innate conditions made Burrow's love destined to be a tragedy. Dinah was the daughter of a marquis and was loyal to the king, while Burrow was the son of a low baron and the one who was the least valued one. As a result, his story became very common, just like the stories often heard in roadside bards and fairy tales. But unlike fairy tales, the gap between the rich and the poor in love was not crossed, but buried deep in the gap. By coincidence, Bulo had become a hunter. He had shown amazing fighting ability. Coupled with the bullying he had suffered since childhood, he had a gloomy temperament. When he was a teenager, he was already very shrewd. He had secretly killed his brother and sister and framed his father's second wife. When the family was in a state of chaos, he had secretly killed his father. Then he had used an iron fist to inherit the title. After receiving the title and fief, he immediately sought refuge with an earl and worked hard to show his value and loyalty to the earl. After gaining the earl's appreciation, he secretly hooked up with the earl's daughter. In the end, not long after the earl married the earl's daughter, he plotted to kill the earl and banished all the earl's children to slavery. The one who married him also committed suicide by poisoning himself. After becoming an earl, he turned to a king and used the king's intelligence channels and resources to quickly improve his strength and became stronger step by step. However, his beloved Dana was offered to a king as a concubine by that marquis, becoming a political sacrifice. In his grief and indignation, he joined the hunt and left the team. However, he unexpectedly encountered an extremely rare ancient monster. This ancient monster was on the verge of death, as if it had just gone through a great battle. It was incomparably weak, and he was fortunate enough to encounter it. After obtaining the ability of the ancient demon, his strength skyrocketed. While his strength was increasing rapidly, he carefully hid it, not daring to attract the attention of the king who sought refuge with him. He secretly colluded with the witch demon in his territory to conduct biological experiments. Not long after, he received news that Dinah was strangled to death by the cruel king when she was sleeping with him. Burrow was furious when he received the news, but he did not act impulsively. Instead, he snuck into the cemetery of the king's territory at night and secretly dug up Dinah's buried body. He brought it back to his territory and used the technology he learned to preserve the body. In the following days, he discovered the ice worm's secret through constant experiments and guessed the truth behind the king of the empire. But he still decided to become the king for revenge. However, he used a special method to seal the ice worm in his body and only squeezed its power but didn't let it interfere with his consciousness. Finally, it broke out and killed the king who killed Dinah. Afterward, he betrayed the empire and fled. Dean was immersed in Burrow's past life and didn't know the passage of time. He gradually understood Burrow's crazy behavior when he saw Dinah's beautiful smile. He saw his own shadow in the latter. However, Burrow's character was different from his. Although he was forbearing, but his temperament was more eccentric, cold, and abnormal. The dead can't come back to life. It's just a few words, and it's easy to say. But if it's a loved one who died, then the meaning behind it is so sad. Dean thought of Aisha, and he didn't know where she was at the moment. He wanted to immediately appear by her side, even if it was just to quietly watch her and protect her. At this time, the balls were still pouring in from the gap, and they quickly broke. There seemed to be endless memory balls. Dean saw more pictures from the broken balls. In addition to the pictures which were obviously Burrow's memories, there were some strange pictures. There was a giant city similar to the Empire. There was the memory of a child's growth he had never seen before. He was born in an ordinary family. He was studying to be a lawyer. He was born in an aristocratic family. He learned to paint, got married, had children, and grew old. Chapter 12:07. Are these other people's memories? Dean was puzzled as he saw that some of the memory spheres had broken. At the end of the picture, a completely different scene appeared. It was as if he had suddenly jumped from one scene to another. One moment, he was in a luxurious restaurant drinking with friends. The next moment, he appeared in a spacious study room. There were bookshelves in front of him. There were thick books stacked on top of them. He felt that this study was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. After thinking about it carefully, he remembered that this was the study he had seen in Burrow's memories. This was the study of Burrow's Castleback when he was a count. The next moment, he saw the scene move. From the perspective of a pair of eyes, he saw two slender and broad palms wearing top-grade emerald rings. It was Bolo's hands. He fell asleep again. Boluo's voice appeared on the screen, muttering to himself. Dean was startled. Was this Burrow's dream? The other memory spheres kept shattering, and new scenes appeared. It was another stranger's life, but when he was in his 20s, he was suddenly murdered on the street. Then, the scene changed, and he appeared in a dark bedroom. Bolo's voice rang out. Another nightmare. More and more memory spheres were broken. Dean saw dozens of lives with different identities. Most of the memories were pictures of Burrow after he woke up. These different lives were all his dreams. Dream. The more Dean read, the more puzzled he became. He only saw occasional dreams mixed with real life. Those dreams occupied a very small part of the memory. There were only a few fragments, a few blurred faces, or the figure of a giant beast. None of them were clear. But when he saw Boluo's dream, it was incomparably clear. Everyone had experienced a lifetime. Some died prematurely, while others lived to the end of their lives. Dean suddenly realized that these dreams were false. Burrow had fabricated them. Because of the fabrication, they were incomparably clear. Every life was designed by Burrow after careful consideration. There were some people who were very similar to Burrow. There were some scenes where he could see the shadow of the imperial capital and the giant wall. There were also some people who were completely different from Burrow. There were even women, old people, and children who had nothing to do with Burrow. Under normal circumstances, who would become a woman or an old man in their dreams? Burrow deliberately designed such a dream, mainly because of Crimson Moon. Crimson Moon was a woman. In order to make Crimson Moon believe that she was Burrow's dream and her real identity was Burrow, he had to design such a dream. Moreover, he had to make it obscure. That was why children and old men were interspersed in the dream. So, this is Burrow's way of confusing Crimson Moon's memories. Dean finally understood why Crimson Moon thought he was Burrow. When Burrow tracked Sylvia to look for Crimson Moon, he had already planned this. Crimson Moon's betrayal and escape when the Bloodthorn Monarch and the others joined forces was also within his expectations. He had long noticed that Crimson Moon wasn't like other clones who completely obeyed him. Before he found Crimson Moon, he had planned to be killed by Crimson Moon. Then, he would merge his memories with Crimson Moon's body. Then he would merge with Crimson Moon. Rather than saying that he was killed by Crimson Moon, it would be better to say that he had voluntarily given up his body. Burrow had expected that Crimson Moon would visit his memories after killing him. Therefore, He had woven a large number of clear dream memories in his memory. One dream life after another was incomparably long. If Burrow's life was said to be 10 memories, then the other fabricated memories would be said to be 500. Under the impact of the large number of clear dream lives, Crimson Moon was confused. She mistakenly thought that she was one of Burrow's dreams. When a certain condition was reached, such as fully displaying the demonic body, she would trigger Burrow's hidden weapon. Then, she would wake up from the dream of Crimson Moon and become Burrow. This was like a person who had lived for 10 years and suddenly turned into a beast. After living for 10,000 years, perhaps he had long regarded himself as a beast instead of a human. Zhuang Zhou dreaming of a butterfly. Dean thought of an ancient story and sighed. He had to say that Burrow was an outstanding and wise man. However, his obsession was too deep. If he had used his own body as an experiment, he would have already completed the demigod experiment on himself. He would have become comparable to the Demon Emperor. Coupled with his intelligence, he could have used his body to the extreme. Dean even felt that if it was the Demon Emperor who had been imprisoned in the divine cage, the latter might not have been able to break out. Fabricating a large number of memories and then cutting off the thoughts of the fabricated memories from the brain's memory core. This way, the possibility of Crimson Moon being confused is very high. Dean looked at the memory balls that were still breaking. There was a trace of fear in his heart. If these memory balls weren't broken one by one, he would have watched them from the beginning to the end like Crimson Moon's memories. He would have been lost in them and regarded his life as one of Burrow's dreams. When a certain condition was triggered, perhaps he would wake up as Burrow and continue to complete Burrow's goal and cause. Even though he's dead, this preparation could allow him to come back to life at any time. Dean admired and sighed as he thought of Crimson Moon's appearance. In a sense, Burrow's method could allow him to live forever. As long as he spread his memories, the more he spread, the more clones he would have. These memories were like a seed that would breed a new Burrow. However, was this really considered living? Dean was a little confused. It had always been a very difficult thing to distinguish between life and death. However, with his current appearance, it seemed that he didn't need to distinguish what was real life. Because when he was searching for life, he was already dead. And this place was his hell. He imagined that if he could still live, he would learn this trick of Burrow's and use Burrow's method to awaken his memories in other living beings. He would turn the other living beings into him. But was that him and the current him the same? As he thought about it, he suddenly felt bored and was too lazy to think about it. At this moment, the broken balls outside the cracks slowly decreased until they stopped pouring in. The remaining balls in front of him broke one by one and disappeared completely. The monotonous, unchanging bloody world was restored in front of him. Chapter 1208. Whoosh! A bloody gust of wind swept past, and a giant claw burning with black flames descended from the sky, blocking Lin Chongqing's path of retreat. Illusion. Lin Chongqing's face was ugly. At the moment when the giant black flame claw approached, a thick, dark energy suddenly rose from his body. With a swoosh, he passed through the giant black flame claw, and his body was unscathed. It seemed that the giant black flame claw was just a virtual projection, but in fact, Lin Chongqing combined the White Tiger King's illusory ability and the Demon Overlord's dark energy to complete it. Lin Chongqing's illusion allowed him to pass through matter, and the black flame on the giant claw was actually an energy attack created by the origami imitating the Demon Emperor's ability. Lin Chongqing noticed this, so he changed his body structure to the same energy to achieve this same frequency. Therefore, he passed through the claw without any hindrance and was not hurt at all. If the Demon Emperor was here, he would have noticed that Lin Chongqing had already mastered the secret of his ability. The origami was stunned for a moment when its claw missed, as if it did not expect such a strange situation to happen. However, it quickly reacted and quickly chased after Lin Chongqing. This time, other than the black flame, there were also silver threads in the claw, which were the special silk blades that Crimson Moon used to create the divine cage. Lin Chongqing's expression changed slightly. He took a deep breath and once again crashed into the black giant claw. With a swoosh, he passed through the giant claw again. Even if it was Crimson Moon's silver threads, he had also created it. In fact, he had already mastered the internal structure of the silver threads. When he saw Crimson Moon casting her ability, he secretly tested it in his body and created it with a little modification. This was also one of the methods he prepared to deal with the Demon Emperor, and it was also the reason why he was confident that he could kill the Demon Emperor without relying on nuclear weapons. However, the origami that appeared out of nowhere was just too powerful. Furthermore, he could already tell that this origami was obviously not as simple as an origami. The word origami could be removed from its name. It was a true god. He asked himself, even if he obtained the divine body of the Demon Emperor and had infinite potential, he would not be able to master so many high-end abilities in such a short period of time. The control of the body could be said to be at the level of a whim, and any form could be formed with a single thought. Moreover, the speed at which the origami absorbed the earth and converted it into its own energy was not something that a Demon Emperor or an ordinary origami could compare with. It was completely at the level of a god. When Crimson Moon and the others attacked the Confederation, Lin Chongqing had used the virtual host to simulate the subsequent situation. Everything was in his script, except for the sudden appearance of this origami that exceeded his expectations. At this moment, he was silently calculating the situation outside the simulation. There were still 6 minutes left before the simulation ended. This was originally a backup plan that he had prepared just in case, and now he could use it on this origami. However, he did not know if he could hold on for 6 minutes. If it was the Demon Emperor, Candle Dragon Master, Crimson Moon, and the others who were attacking him together, he was confident that he could still hold on if he used all his strength. However, this origami's improvement was too fast, and he still had to reserve his strength to prevent the Demon Emperor from escaping. 6 minutes might seem like a short time, but to him, every second felt like a year. After escaping from its claws twice in a row, the origami was obviously a little angry. It slightly bared its teeth, which were full of terrifying sharp teeth. It let out a low growl from its throat and suddenly swung its giant claws again. This time, the giant claws were still black flames, and the silver threads on it were like sharp blades. There was also a dark green poisonous gas in it. When Lin Chongqing saw the dark green poisonous gas, he frowned slightly. He recognized that it was the poison that one of the kings who died before him was proficient in. He secretly prepared it in his body, and the moment he got close to the origami, he instantly constructed it. Boom! An intense burning pain spread throughout his body. His limbs and bones were trembling as if they were about to shatter. With a swoosh, the iceberg that Lin Chongqing had turned into shattered. He crashed into the ground like a blue meteor, creating a huge crater. In the crater, Lin Chongqing's body was torn apart, but it quickly gathered and healed itself. His face was extremely pale. He had been tricked by the origami. He believed that the origami did not see through his ability. After all, he had used his ability at the moment when he was very close to it. It was only for a moment, so it was almost impossible to see through the secret of his ability, unless it was like Dean, who figured it out on its own. However, the origami did not possess the knowledge of humans, so it should not have thought of this. However, it still used the same attack method again, except that it added an additional ability to it. It seemed like it was used to deal with Lin Chongqing, but in fact it was used to paralyze and confuse him. Chapter 1209. Although it doesn't have much knowledge and can only copy abilities, but its nature is cunning and its ability to learn is amazing. It won't be long before it can use its own body to create different abilities. Lin Chongqing stood up from the pit and looked at the origami that was grinning in the air. It seemed as if the origami was laughing at him. He wasn't angry, but his eyebrows were wrinkled. If his guess was correct, then the monster was born from Dean's heart. From the time Dean died to the moment the monster was born, it had grown to this point in just a few minutes. Moreover, it was still growing at an amazing speed. Who knew how much it would evolve in the next 6 minutes? Was this the level of eternal life that the sages in origami were pursuing? Suddenly, he understood the extreme pursuit of the aliens. It was indeed a power that made people thirst for. There was a trace of passion in his eyes, but he quickly hid it. He saw that the origami was about to rush towards him again. He said, "Wait a minute, I can help you get what you need." The origami that was swooping down waved its giant claws as if it didn't hear Lin Chongsheng's words. Lin Chongsheng didn't give up and continued, "I know you can understand my words. You can't kill me, or you will lose more. I can help you get whatever you need. I can be your servant." There was a trace of doubt in the origami's eyes. Wow! Upon hearing its voice, Lin Chongsheng was delighted. As long as he could communicate with the origami, he was confident that he would be able to delay the battle for 6 minutes. Moreover, he did not even need to fight with the origami. Judging from the rate at which the origami was evolving in battle, Lin Chongsheng felt that the origami would become more and more ferocious as it fought. It would use Lin Chongsheng as a whetstone. There are many beautiful places in this world, many treasures, and many powerful enemies. I can help you rule them as quickly as possible and devour them. Lin Chongsheng tried to figure out the latter's thoughts. It was only natural that he had to cater to the latter's interests when talking. Wow! The origami slowly stopped and landed about 100 meters in front of Lin Chongsheng. A small silver claw appeared on its giant claw. It scratched its head and looked puzzled. "You can't speak?" Lin Chongsheng was surprised. How could the origami not learn human language with its intelligence? Could it be because he was born too young that he couldn't learn how to imitate? He did not continue to dwell on this point. Even if he was mute, he could still communicate. "Do you like to eat people like that? I can take you to many people like that, and there are many delicious things that I can take you to try." He demonized a tentacle from his arm and gently stretched it forward without any hostility. His tone was gentle as well. "This is a censer that I weaved. You can weave the same censer, and we will be able to communicate spiritually." The desolate god tilted its head slightly, a bit puzzled. Then, a similar tentacle appeared on its body. Its speed was so fast that it caused Lin Chongsheng's heart to tremble. It really is a newborn. Although it is cunning and powerful, how can it be a match for the craftiness of humans? Lin Chongsheng looked at the origami's dumbfounded expression and suddenly felt that the latter was a little ridiculous. However, when the tentacles were about to touch him, he quickly put away those thoughts and showed an incomparably sincere emotion, conveying it through the tentacles. The two tentacles intersected and connected like vipers. Roar! In the next moment, Lin Chongsheng suddenly felt a huge bloody mouth coming towards him. He was caught off guard, and all the pores on his body tightened. However, he quickly reacted and knew that it was the will that was transmitted from the origami after the tentacles were connected. The latter was like a ferocious beast, letting out a deafening roar and madly attacking him. The whole world seemed to have turned into a world of blood. Damn it! Lin Chongsheng immediately understood that the origami was playing with him. It had no intention to negotiate at all. When he wanted to retract the tentacles, he found that the tentacles were already swollen. A large number of blood vessels swelled on the surface. At the other end of the connection, it seemed that there was something rushing towards him along the tentacles of the origami, giving him an extremely terrifying feeling of danger. With a bang, he decisively cut off the connecting tentacles. Blood splattered, and a large number of loach-like worms quickly crawled out of the wound. They were all sticky and wriggling on the ground. Wah wah wah! Like a sharp laughter, a strange laughter came from the other side of the origami. The mouth of the origami was wide open, and its face was filled with a strange smile. It was patting its stomach, like a human laughing with its belly held. Lin Chongsheng instantly felt a sense of humiliation. He thought that the beast was naive, but the latter thought that he was naive. The truth proved that he had indeed underestimated his enemy. He actually wanted to communicate with a monster and almost got himself killed. Boom! Suddenly, the ground around him shook, and Lin Changsheng was awakened. He thought of something, and his pupils shrank. He suddenly rushed upwards, but he saw that the light had dimmed. The ground within a few hundred meters around him was like the sharp claws of an octopus, curling towards him, trying to grab him inside. F***CK. Lin Changsheng could not help but curse. His body suddenly turned into a beam of light. Like the king of light, his body was covered in white mist, and he rushed out from the gap of the ground that was closing up. However, the structure of the land had been secretly altered by the origami. The soft sand and stones had become as hard as oars. Spikes that were covered in dark flames and silver threads were shooting out from the stones like the shell of a sea urchin. "Get lost!" Lin Changsheng roared in anger. His face was ferocious, and it was the first time he showed such an expression. Blood-like viscous fluid suddenly gushed out of his body, and a large number of sharp claws and arms stretched out from within, ramming toward one of the sharp spikes. Boom! The ground closed up. A dull sound came from inside. Looking from afar, the sand and grass on the surface of the nearby ground had completely disappeared, leaving only the bare soil at the bottom. On the ground was a round ball that was hundreds of meters tall. It was extremely round, like a mini version of the artificial Earth. Boom! A loud sound suddenly rang out, and one of the parts of the ball cracked. A blood-colored figure rushed out from within, and it was Lin Changsheng. Damn it, damn it, damn it! Lin Changsheng's eyes turned red. He had actually been toyed with by a monster. From the very beginning, the monster had landed on the ground in order to plant its feet in the ground and lay a trap to kill him. If he hadn't used all his strength, it was likely that the monster would have succeeded. Compared to the crushing power, the teasing of intelligence made him even angrier. For more minutes, Lin Changsheng felt that the number was enough to make him feel despair. He had already expected that the next 6 minutes would be difficult, but now he realized that he had underestimated the origami. Even holding on for one more minute would be extremely difficult for him. Chapter 12:10. Run, run, run. Lin Changsheng had no intention of fighting. He just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible and destroy this origami with nuclear weapons before it fully matured. He exhaled a thick mist that looked like the ink of an octopus. It lingered in the air without dispersing. This black mist was different from the demon overlord's mist. It did not have any substantial attack or corrosive power. However, the complex and chaotic structure within it could block the penetrating power of the eye. It was one of the methods that he had painstakingly come up with over 100 years of hard work. The moment he released the black mist, his body quickly demonized. A pair of sleek wings that looked like a fighter jet appeared on his back. The side of his body also demonized into a metal rhombus-like structure. His speed instantly increased to the maximum. The air resistance was reduced to the minimum. The gravitational force from the ground was also resisted by the anti-gravitational force constructed in his body. This was the most ideal flying state that he had created by combining a large amount of knowledge. Whoosh! 3,000 meters in an instant. His figure was as fast as a flash of light. His speed was more than 10 times faster than when he transformed into an iceberg. Whether it was the black mist or his current flying state, they were all trump cards that he had painstakingly constructed. One of them could instantly cut off the enemy's vision during close combat. This way, even if the enemy's hearing was sensitive, it would be useless. After all, the speed of sound transmission was slower than the speed of the enemy's attack. As for the damage caused by the explosion, he could barely survive. The second one was to save his life. It was enough for him to easily shake off the other kings. Because of this, he dared to transform into an ice bird and fly leisurely. Although he seemed to be panicking, he was actually calm. He was also using the demon overlord and the other's thoughts to instigate internal strife and buy time for the mechanical army that he had secretly arranged to seize the nuclear weapons and completely control the situation. In the blink of an eye, Lin Changsheng had rushed more than 10 miles away. His speed was close to half the speed of an intercontinental ballistic missile. This meant that the nuclear weapons would not be able to hit him. After all, his vision was more than 5 times that of a nuclear bomb. When a nuclear bomb appeared in his vision, he had enough speed to avoid the center of the nuclear explosion. As for the damage caused by the explosion in the non-center of a nuclear bomb, it was barely enough for him to survive. However, this did not mean that he was not afraid of nuclear weapons. The status of nuclear weapons was still the ruling level. One nuclear weapon could not pose a threat to him. If it was a large-scale attack, even if he was twice as fast, he would still be blasted into ashes. Whoosh! Lin Changsheng charged forward at full speed like a madman. Although his explosive speed had left the Demon Emperor, Fei Yu, and the others behind by a few streets, he was still extremely nervous in his heart. This rage god was not like the half-baked Demon Emperor and Fei Yu. It was a true god. It could understand any kind of ability with just a glance. And once it saw the structure of his body, it would definitely be able to imitate it immediately and chase after him. He could only pray that the dark shroud that he created could block the vision of the origami. Then he could seize the opportunity to escape from the origami's sight and perception. 5 seconds later, Lin Changsheng had already appeared 16 miles away. An eyeball split open at the back of his head, turning slightly. When he saw that no one was chasing after him, he let out a sigh of relief. However, his speed didn't decrease. Instead, he accelerated once more. On the other side, the origami dived headfirst into the dark mist. It shook its head, but the mist was thick and did not disperse, blocking its vision. It let out a low roar and suddenly opened its mouth, inhaling the thick black mist. However, it did not see Lin Changsheng's figure in midair. The prey that fell into his palm disappeared just like that. Roar. The origami let out a furious roar. It was slightly angry and exasperated. Like a monkey, it slapped its knees and flew around in midair. Suddenly, it thought of something. It twitched its nose and sniffed the air. It smelled a scent coming from afar. Instantly, a ferocious glint appeared in its eyes as it chased after the scent. A moment later, it stopped in midair and looked around. However, it realized that all the senses that it had been tracking had disappeared. Whether it was the scent or the trace of the elements in the air, everything had disappeared. It was as if Lin Changsheng had vanished into thin air. The eyeballs on the head of the origami were extremely ferocious. It blinked its blood-red eyes and looked around. However, it still could not find any clues. It could not help but clench its claws and roar angrily. After roaring for a while, the origami's body suddenly trembled slightly. Immediately after that, all of the eyes on its head were closed. The gap between its eyelids had also closed up. Only the 2 original eyes were blinking slightly. The expression on its face seemed to be a little nervous. Lowering its head to look at its left shoulder, the flesh there was slightly bulging. The bulging was getting taller and taller like a round ball. The bulging continued to rise upwards. Finally, the silhouette of a head appeared on top of the round ball. If Lin Changsheng was still here, he would be shocked to find that the face belonged to Dean, who had died from spontaneous combustion. After the facial features became clear, Dean was a little shocked. After a moment of sluggishness, he slightly turned his head and looked at the heavy breathing coming from the side. Impressively, it was the head of a ferocious monster. He could even see the sharp teeth in the monster's mouth. Similarly, he also noticed that his current situation was that he was growing on the shoulder of the monster. Is this hell? Dean was a bit confused, but there was not much fear in his heart. He was not afraid of the ferocious monster around him. After all, he had died once. So after glancing at the monster, he turned his head to look at the hell world. He found that it was no different from when he was alive. There was the same unreachable sky and huge dark land. There was also an uncertain and delicate wind. There was also a strong smell of blood that came from life. After a moment, Dean's eyes suddenly swept to the outline of a very small building in the distance. Suddenly, his brain felt numb, as if it had been struck by lightning. He felt that the blood in his body was agitated. He found that it was not hell, but the earth. In other words, he was still alive. Thinking of this, he immediately turned his head to look at the monster. His body instinctively turned into a sharp blade that covered his whole body like a hedgehog. He coldly looked at the monster. The monster also looked at him with a somewhat excited expression. Wow! Dean slightly frowned and made a defensive posture. At the same time, he glanced at his lower body. From the waist down, his body was connected to the monster's shoulder. Could it be that the bloody world that he saw before was inside the monster's body? In other words, he had been swallowed by it before? If so, then why did he die and resurrect? Dean couldn't figure it out, but he soon found that there was no killing intent in the monster. Moreover, the monster's eyes were obviously not human, and the things revealed were also not human emotions, but he could read them. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.